Imagine getting kicked out of an S-rank party, being considered the most useless, and then everything starts falling apart without you. That is exactly what happens to Gaius, an item master who was kicked out by the Crescent Fangs after they saddled him with all the unpleasant work, and blamed him for being useless. But as soon as he's gone, the truth comes to light. The party can't even handle basic tasks anymore, and their supposed strength turns out to be just an illusion. Thus begins the story of how someone useless can actually be the most important one. This content is an original narrative recap by the channel author, created with a specific style and their own structure and approach. It does not reproduce the original material literally and constitutes a transformative work. The blonde boy starts the conversation by calling out to Gaius. The woman with the witch's hat intervenes, saying it's not that they really dislike him or anything like that, but that things are different now. The leader boasts about their new status and explains that they have finally become an S-rank party. He tells Gaius that they need to stop having to protect an item master like him during their battles, which leaves Gaius standing there in shock. He looks at his friends and asks if this is really what he thinks it is. With a nervous smile and sweat sliding down his face, Gaius asks if this is the moment they are officially firing him. The blonde boy doesn't beat around the bush. He flashes a satisfied smile and confirms that, to put it bluntly, yes, that is exactly what is happening, while the rest of the party stands behind him, looking ready for their new life as elites. The tavern remains noisy and crowded as Gaius starts to process the weight of the news. Gaius looks down at the table, his eyes shadowed as he repeats the fact that they are actually firing him, thinking about his position and how he is only seen as an entry-level item master to the people he trusted. Gaius stands there feeling completely dejected. He really thought he was doing something useful for the party, but looking at them now, he admits to himself that things had become quite awkward lately, and it turns out everyone else in the party was already pairing up, leaving him as the outsider of the group. Gaius forces a fake smile and tells them he understands, finally giving up on trying to stay with them. He thinks about how they have finally reached S-rank, and deduces that he can probably manage on his own. So maybe this really is the right time to leave. While holding the party's rank badge, he considers simply returning to the countryside to find a normal job. Before leaving, Gaius asks what he should do with all the group's shared items that he still has in his inventory. The blonde leader seems totally annoyed and tells him he doesn't want any of it. He simply tells Gaius to leave it all at the mansion. The witch shoots him a look and calls him a worrywart, while the female knight simply gives him a thumbs up. She mentions that at least he wasn't as bad as some guy named Gul'jan, and tells him that actually, he was a good man. The witch waves goodbye and tells him they should meet again, if fate allows, while the knight raises his thumb, telling him to stay warm, and the priestess admits she's going to feel lonely, telling Gaius to take care of himself. Gaius just gives them a kind smile and tells everyone to take care. The party stands there watching him walk away, while Gaius raises a hand to wave goodbye one last time. Walking away through the quiet city streets, alone under the night sky, he stops for a second and tells himself it's time to get going because he still has a lot of work to do, thinking about all those shared party items he still carries with him, and that he has to leave them at the mansion. In fact, he starts to wonder if all the gear he has will even fit in the place. But there's also the matter of the draconic mounts, which still need care. Gaius decides he'll do one last job for them by cleaning the stables and changing the feed before officially calling it quits. Gaius starts walking away, but he can't help feeling a bit worried about many things, especially wondering if his former party will manage without him to take care of the gear. He stands in the middle of the street for a second, thinking about everything in silence. Then he shrugs and shouts that he's finally free, raising his hands as if he'd just won the lottery. The story takes a strange turn when a narrator's box tells the readers they probably already know where this is going, expecting a typical exile story or a great social drama to begin unfolding. The narration continues, saying that people probably expect Gaius to make a big comeback. But it turns out the readers are totally wrong about how this story works. Back at the mansion, the party leader smiles to himself, saying that's one job done. When finishing, he seems quite satisfied with himself and says he's glad Gaius didn't lose his cool and get angry. The party leader relaxes with a smile, mentioning in passing that Gaius was actually a pretty decent guy. But Hannah looks down at the table and starts to wonder if exiling him was actually a bad decision on their part. She tries to downplay it, saying it couldn't be helped, since Gaius was nothing more than a low-level item master without any ambition. And since they have finally reached S rank, she feels they couldn't let someone like him hold them back. The party leader intervenes to break the mood, telling Gul'jin and Hannah that there is absolutely nothing to worry about. He treats it as a joke, insisting that getting rid of Gaius was without a doubt the right decision for everyone involved. And he even asks the girls if they really think Gaius would want to see them this depressed. Gul'jin raises his glass and agrees that Gaius was a great guy. Then he turns to Larissa to see what she thinks. Larissa nods and says that, of course, he was, but she is already moving on to other things, quoting a famous phrase about how every new beginning should start with a great feast. Larissa keeps the mood up, saying they should follow the example of their predecessors and celebrate this new beginning in style. And the party leader completely agrees, flashing a huge smile while telling her she's absolutely right, summarizing their new S-rank cards, shouting that they have finally reached the top, and that they are starting a new chapter for the Crescent Claw. Everyone grabs their drinks and clinks their mugs, shouting toasts while beer splashes everywhere, as the party dives into a grand feast to celebrate their big promotion. After eating their fill, the party makes the trip back to their base. But when they finally arrive, they are met with a giant mountain of monster remains and trash piled up against the wall. The whole party stands there with their mouths open, completely shocked by the mess blocking their front door, looking at a huge pile of dragon scales, old armor, and rare crystals abandoned in the yard, which leaves the team totally baffled as they try to figure out what all that stuff is doing there. The blonde party leader stands staring at the mess, asking what this is, and what on earth happened to their house. The rest of the group joins her and starts screaming, plunged into absolute confusion. Looking closer at the pile, they see real dragon skin lying there, along with a giant cyclops eye, and a bunch of other rare monster materials they recognize, which makes them realize the mountain of junk is actually valuable loot. Like this huge griffin claw, there's even a full set of camping gear hidden in there, plus a bunch of other items and useful articles, leading Hannah to wonder if Gaius had really been accumulating all these materials for this whole time. The knight sees the claw and starts getting nostalgic, remembering their old life-or-death fight with the griffin, but the leader snaps, yelling at them and asking if this is really the time to start reminiscing, while the sheer surprise of seeing all their things outside is enough to make the whole party instantly regain their sanity. Even while they were busy telling jokes, the members of the S-rank party, Crescent Claw, finally understood how serious the situation really was. The blonde leader starts to sweat, and as Larissa says, it's clearly obvious that things are getting out of hand. But the story rewinds a bit to show how this whole mess started, taking us back a few hours before the members of Crescent Claw fell into a total panic. Right at that very moment, those idiots were still busy celebrating their supposed new beginning. Gaius is in the stables petting the dragon horses and telling them to take care, as one of the animals makes a sad sound, as if it knew he was leaving forever. So Gaius takes one last look at them with a calm smile before walking away. He stops in front of that huge mountain of loot and materials. He looks at the pile and wonders if he is leaving too much behind, but thinks it's better to wait for the right moment to use all these items he has gathered. Gaius looks back at his tools, thinking about how his negotiation skills help them sell the rare loot. But he quickly realizes that he no longer has time to take care of those things for the party. So he just smiles and tells himself that they aren't newbies, so they will probably manage just fine on their own. Handling materials and talking to merchants is something basic for any adventurer. So Gaius feels that he has finally done everything he had to do for them. He decides to go out to make his usual rounds and visit his regular clients for one last time, walking away into the night while repeating that they aren't newbies. The big question is if Crescent Claw can really handle the simple things that Gaius expects of them. The whole party is lying on the floor looking totally shattered and miserable. And it turns out they couldn't even get into their mansion, so they've been forced to stay at a cheap inn. The party is still stuck in the inn, and the leader wonders aloud what they are supposed to do with all the gear and the items they are carrying. Hannah points out that the materials are supposed to be sold, while Larissa reminds everyone that they also have a bunch of rare loot. Larissa keeps insisting, saying it would be a huge waste to let all that valuable loot go to waste. So the leader admits that he has never sold materials and asks Gul'jin if he has any ideas. But Hannah just mutters that she doesn't remember how to do it either. They all sit on the floor forming a circle until, suddenly, they come up with an idea. The leader looks up, finally feeling he has found a way to solve their problem. And as they all get into bed, he tells the girls that everything will work out somehow. He decides that the first thing they will do tomorrow morning is call a merchant to take care of the loot. Honestly, the four of them are so exhausted that they don't want to think about their problems anymore. And very soon the sun rises, and it is officially morning for the party. The party heads to a local shop called Kirov that claims to buy almost anything. They enter the messy shop and go straight to the counter to talk to the clerk. The leader flashes a big smile and asks the clerk if he can come and pick up a bunch of materials they are trying to sell. But the guy just stares at them. The shopkeeper asks them if they are the same party that kicked out Gaius, which catches the whole group by surprise. The blonde leader is totally surprised that everyone already knows what happened in their private party. And Hannah and the knight get angry because the clerk addressed Gaius as Sir while he just called them those guys. Larissa joins the complaints, saying she wants to be called Miss, instead of being disrespected like that. The shopkeeper finally gives in, though he reminds them that it should actually be them bringing the gear to him. The leader quickly apologizes for the inconvenience as they prepare to leave. The four of them get on a cart with the merchant and head back to take care of all the remaining loot. The shopkeeper stays behind and observes the huge pile of loot the group has brought. He just looks at the mountain of loot with a totally indifferent expression on his face. The party leader starts bragging, asking if he sees dragon or griffin stuff that often. But the clerk ignores the bluster and asks them how long they have been adventuring. Or knowing Gaius, the leader admits they started 3 years ago and that they spent about 2 of them working with Gaius Hannah. And the rest of the group is very proud of their track record, although the clerk points out that they have been with Gaius since they were practically newbies. He sighs and says that, honestly, he doesn't know if they are the luckiest or the most unfortunate people in the world, leaving Hannah, Larissa, and the knight standing there with completely blank expressions. And confused, the knight finally asks if they are mocking them, and the girls realize they are being ridiculed. Larissa finally realizes they are being mocked, while the clerk just looks at the party as if they were idiots. He points to the huge pile of loot and asks if they are really trying to sell him a pile of junk. The party leader stands there with a totally lost look, unable to process the situation. The shopkeeper starts to lose his temper and yells at them for trying to leave all that trash at his shop. This affects the leader a lot. He takes a step back, asking if their materials are actually just low-quality trash. And the clerk points his finger at him, shouting that they are totally wrong if they think they can sell just any old thing they find. He tells them bluntly that Gaius didn't accumulate things for no reason, making it clear that the shop only buys parts from large monsters when there is an official notice. So most of this is useless. He explains that, even for medium-sized pieces, having more isn't better, since the preparation work is too expensive, which turns the pile of parts into nothing more than firewood, and they aren't going to process them themselves. The clerk doesn't stop scolding them, telling them to use their heads a little before calling his attention for nothing. He yells at them that if they have no idea what to do with all that loot, they should put it in their item bag and get lost. The party leader stands there with a totally lost look. He has never been spoken to like that, looking away. The clerk thinks to himself that Gaius would never do something so stupid, making it clear that the leader is totally out of his element. Anyway, he just blurts out that they will buy a new item bag. Honestly, he is confused by the whole situation, as he had never been scolded like that in his life. Hannah intervenes from behind saying she has the money, and that she wants him to make a bag with the highest possible capacity. The shopkeeper sighs and warns the party that processing those materials takes a whole day of work. They better have the money, which makes the leader quite nervous, who asks the guy exactly how much all this is going to cost. The clerk rubs his chin and starts doing some calculations, telling them it will be more or less. The clerk gives them the price, 12 gold coins, and the party leader looks as if his soul just left his body. Hannah can't even process the figure, but the leader immediately loses his temper and screams that the price is a real ripoff. The clerk stands there with his eyes closed, taking in the disrespect with terrifying calm. Suddenly, he leans towards them with a terrifying look and asks if they think doing business is some kind of joke, which plunges them both into panic, bowing instantly and apologizing for having crossed the line. He keeps pushing them, telling them that the only reason he is offering them that price is because he respects Gaius. The guy points out that they are lucky he is even talking to them, since the shop isn't even buying large beasts at the moment. He explains that processing all their scrap will force him to close the doors to other customers, and that if they keep thinking he is ripping them off, they can take their materials home and let them rot in the ground. The clerk demands full payment right then and there, leaving the whole party looking defeated and penniless. The clerk stares at them and tells them that, if they want the work done, they have to pay the full price, leaving the whole party looking like they had lost their best friend, totally exhausted and defeated. It turns out the shopkeeper wasn't trying to be a bully. He just got a little annoyed because the party had the nerve to call him a scammer. The reality of their situation is clear. If Gaius were still with them, he would have done everything cheaper and with a much better attitude. But while the former party is struggling to get by, Gaius is in the middle of a forest, standing next to new people. A young man with a sword thanks him for saving his life, and the girl next to him practically begs him to accept some kind of reward for the help. Gaius just gives them a kind smile and tells them that no reward is necessary. He looks at a dead goblin and says it's a drag to run into monsters like that when you're just trying to gather herbs. The novice girl tells Gaius that she had run out of mana and thought it was the end for her. She is so happy. He stepped in and even managed to find the exact herbs she needed. Gaius brushes it off by saying it was nothing and that he just knew where the plants grew. And as the newbies say goodbye, he starts thinking that being a guide for newcomers could be a pretty good life. He asks his mount, Sucre, if he agrees, and the Draconix just replies with a small noise, while Gaius admits to himself that, actually, he's starting to worry a bit about things. Sitting by the campfire, he hopes his old party isn't out there causing problems for other people. But honestly, he has no idea what is actually going on with his former teammates right now. Later, the newbies head to the guild and report that a mysterious adventurer saved them. But the guild staff knows exactly who they are talking about. It's Gaius, the guy they kicked out of Crescent Claw. It is rumored around town that Gaius's reputation keeps growing, even though he is no longer with his old gang. While at the same time, everyone starts thinking that Crescent Claw is actually a joke, and that their name is practically in the gutter. It makes you wonder if these guys will cross paths again in the future. But let's be realistic. They will undoubtedly cross paths sooner or later. It's quite obvious. Probably most of you reading this are thinking the same thing right now, since Gaius keeps moving forward, but you never really know how things will go. And it's impossible for the story to just end like this. Thus begins the parallel story of the decaying party, also known as the Chronicles of the Crescent Claw, which shows the party struggling to stay together as they head toward the mess awaiting them in the next chapter. Right now, the whole team is being mercilessly scolded by the owner of a general store, who is screaming at them at the top of his lungs. And honestly, these spoiled kids don't even have a second to pity themselves, because they are too busy trying to survive the lecture. While everyone else moves on, the old gang gets stuck doing the heavy lifting, sorting through all the items that Gaius left behind. Hannah seems totally absent, blushing and saying she is very busy, but she looks much more distracted than actually productive. She pulls something out of the pile and calls Gul'jin to see it, sounding way too excited for a pile of junk. Gul'jin turns around with a big smile and asks Hannah what she has found. She holds up a horn and asks him if it's from a red cyclops, which triggers a whole emotional trip back to the good old days. Hannah starts talking about how cool Gul'jin was when they started, specifically remembering when he desperately held the line. Using that cover skill, he had just learned to keep them safe. Gul'jin plays along, claiming it was his chivalry and his need to protect Hannah that gave him all that strength. But the reality is very different. In reality, Gaius was in the back doing all the heavy lifting to keep them alive. Now they are standing there flirting over a pile of trash, while the shop owner looks at them like they're crazy. The shop owner watches the party and realizes that he perfectly understands why Gaius decided to leave this party. He hears a strange noise coming from the back and turns around to see what's happening. The draconic mounts are sitting in their stalls, looking completely exhausted and hungry. They don't even make any noise. They just look at him with those sad eyes while he stands there, totally in shock. The blonde leader walks over and casually asks the owner if they are taking care of the mounts. Hannah stands there, looking uncomfortable and silent, while the leader admits he didn't go check on them today. The knight says he didn't either, and Larissa finally realizes that Gaius was the one who had been taking care of everything from the start. The shop owner stands there with a forced smile, doing his best not to completely lose his temper. Finally, he loses his temper and yells at them, calling them all complete idiots for being so useless. The whole party completely loses their cool at the owner's anger. The shop owner looks at the party leader and asks if they seriously dumped all the chores on Gaius. He can't believe they didn't even offer to help, and thinks to himself that these kids are truly useless. The owner tells them this is a big problem, but the leader just makes excuses, saying that Gaius always insisted on doing it himself. The owner gets angry and asks why he didn't offer to do the work together, since it's their own beast. The leader starts sweating and stammers that no one had told him he had to do it. The owner stares at him and asks how he can be so indifferent and act like it's no big deal when the stable trough is just sitting there full of old, dry straw that hasn't been touched in a long time. He orders them to get to work changing the straw and giving the animals food and water immediately. While they struggle with the chores, the owner explains that draconians go wild if they aren't taken care of, and points out that these creatures will never obey someone who doesn't care for them. The shop owner keeps lecturing them, warning them that these mounts will go totally feral in a heartbeat if they aren't treated well, since taking care of your mount is the most important rule any adventurer must follow. Turns out these guys were so busy fighting and with hanging out with people that they completely forgot the basics. And now the Draconix mounts are just standing there watching, totally fed up with the whole situation. They're basically thinking about how annoying all this is. As the party leader manages the chores, the owner tells him to do it twice a day, and to finish before sunset. Meanwhile, Hana realizes that all her rare gear is breaking, and it needs to be fixed with better materials, and the knight gets chewed out for not even knowing what the potions are, something he should have learned a long time ago. The owner can't believe how clueless the whole party is, but finally the sun rises on a new day. The whole party is completely exhausted at their house. The party leader and the others are slumped over the table, while Larissa remains curled up under the blankets, asking everyone who is going to take care of preparing breakfast, since no one is moving. Gul'jin looks up and tells Larissa that she should do it, because it seems like the right thing to do to him. But she immediately loses her cool, and tells him to stop making things up based on his own imagination. Just then, Hana intervenes from the table in a totally annoyed tone and tells Larissa not to shout. First thing in the morning, Gul'jin tries to pass the work off to Hana, reminding her that she complained about Gaius cooking, and that she must know how to prepare something. Hana doesn't want to hear any of it, and tells him to stop bringing up every little detail before pointing her finger at him. She yells that, since Gul'jin is the one who fired Gaius, he is the one who has to cook. Larissa just watches from the bed, pointing out that now it's Hana who is yelling right after having told everyone else to shut up. In the end, Gul'jin gets stuck in the kitchen, standing in front of the stove trying to fry something. For the rest, Gaius gets stuck in the kitchen preparing the food, but while he works, he can't help but wonder if he has made a big mistake, remembering when Gul'jin first asked him why he didn't stop being an item master and change jobs. The two of them were sitting by a campfire in the forest back then, having a serious conversation about his career, when Gaius just smiled and told him that being an item master was the only thing that really made him feel good. He started listing all his specialized skills, like his inventory, his incredible throwing range, and his appraisal skills, pointing out that the item master is the only class that can really combine all those things. Gaius truly believed that if someone could master each and every one of those skills, he would be unbeatable, even compared to all those sophisticated, high-level classes that most adventurers look up to. He promised to work tirelessly to prove that he was worth having around, and asked the group to let him take care of all the support. But back in the present, he stands there with a plate of food in his hand, wondering where it all went wrong. Finally, the table is set with a wide variety of rice and freshly baked bread. But even with everyone sitting down to enjoy a good meal in the kitchen, Gaius is totally absorbed in his own thoughts, remembering how he spent all that time taking care of the draconic mounts. He remembers being alone in the stables and how he never asked the rest of the party for help, mostly because he thought that taking care of your own mount was just something you were supposed to do. And it wasn't just the animals. Basically, the whole party depended on his negotiation skills every time they went shopping. He starts wondering what the others were doing while he was busy keeping the whole group together. And the answer hits him hard. They were just hanging out and flirting while he did all the work. Gaius tries to keep his composure, but he can't help but shed a tear when he realizes how much he was taken for granted. Sitting there alone, crying over his food, Gul'jin sits there with his back to everyone, with his shoulders shaking. The rest of the party can only watch, not knowing what to do. Hana realizes that he is actually sobbing, and Larissa starts to get nervous, repeating that their leader is actually crying right in front of them. The kitchen goes completely silent as the four of them sit around the table. There is just an awkward silence and the sound of Gul'jin breaking down. The party finally accepts the situation. They realize there is nothing they can do but just sit there and let him vent by crying. It turns out the members of Crescent Claw were never prepared to see their leader. The big shot loses cool like this, and later the whole party goes through the city center. looking totally desolate. While everyone on the street watches them pass, the locals start whispering as they walk by, pointing out that they are the infamous party that kicked Gaius out of the group. The rumors spread quickly. People are talking about how they tried to frame the local shop for price gouging. And they can't believe it. Everyone says they don't have the right mindset for an S-rank party. They think all that high-level gear is a waste on them. The crowd keeps making derogatory comments, saying how annoying it is when adventurers act like they own the place. The whole party has no choice but to stand there and take it. The town is in an uproar, with people looking around and acting very confused due to a big commotion. Hannah stares, while Gul'jin looks over his shoulder and asks what all the commotion is about. Shouts and noise start to fill the air over the city streets, and a guy comes running out with his hands up, shouting for someone to help him. Gul'jin and the girls stop in their tracks when someone from the crowd begs for someone to stop them. And it turns out that the draconic mounts have gone completely crazy and are running wild in the middle of the city. The beasts are charging through the streets, causing all the neighbors to run for their lives. A guy says the wholesaler bought too many and simply couldn't keep them under control, and adds that this is exactly what happens when people try to handle more than they are prepared to handle. A woman holding a child screams to call the guild guard immediately before someone gets hurt. Gaius stands there in the middle of all the smoke and dust. He just observes what is happening and stays quiet for a second before saying that they should probably also intervene. Gaius starts sweating a little, realizing that his old party might have caused a scandal just like this, while the draconic mounts continue to go completely crazy and wreck the place. The Kirov clerk is losing his cool, screaming in a panic, because one of the wild beasts has broken into his shop. The armored knight of the Crescent Claw party steps forward. He is ready to use a special skill. He plants his feet and starts to glow with power, acting as a human wall for the city. All the beasts stop what they were doing and stare at him at the same time, and they lunge straight at the knight while he stands firm in front of the three. The three draconians crash into the knight's shield all at once. The impact is huge, but he stands firm while Hana watches from above, waiting for the perfect moment to act. She concentrates her power. It's time for the dark mage to use a special skill. Hana invokes the freezing air, ordering it to take shape and open a path, as she unleashes her path of icicles, causing huge icy spikes to shoot out of the ground. The beasts are trapped in the ice, and just then, the High Cleric Larissa intervenes to finish the job. She jumps high and twirls her staff, releasing a wave of calming magic that hits the beasts and knocks them unconscious. They are completely asleep in the middle of the ice. The people watching can't believe it. They shout about how quickly the party won. Hannah looks back and asks if they have finally finished off all the beasts. But just at that moment, Larissa sees something that leaves her paralyzed, while a lost Draconix shoots out from the smoke straight toward a small child who has no idea what is coming at him. And everyone starts screaming that the beast is heading straight for the child. Meanwhile, the woman nearby loses her cool and screams. Before the beast can reach him, Gul'jin lunges and uses his rank 1 skill to deliver a huge blow, and the Draconix goes flying backwards and hits the ground hard, being completely knocked out. The child stands there, looking up with wide eyes. He is totally impressed by what he just saw. Gul'jin leans down and asks the child if he is okay. After that scare, the onlookers are bewildered and start asking what kind of move that was. They realize he used the back of the sword. So it's explained that, by using the back of the sword instead of the edge, you can inflict a blow strong enough to knock someone unconscious without actually cutting them. Gul'jin stands there with his weapon. It's explained that he is using an advanced paladin skill called Restrain, which consists of showing mercy. This group is known as the Crescent Claw, and being an S-rank group, they certainly have the look that fits, especially with Gul'jin in the lead. Despite all the drama, it's clear that their combat skills are top-notch, and the rest of the group stands ready behind their leader. While everyone watches, a small hand reaches out and tugs on Gul'jin's cloak. It's the little boy from before, and he looks directly at Gul'jin to thank him for saving his life, which completely catches the party leader off guard. The child's eyes literally shine as he tells Gul'jin how strong and cool he is. Basically, he has found a new hero. The townspeople nearby start whispering among themselves, feeling how the atmosphere changes as they watch the scene. A man in the crowd looks worried. Everyone starts to think they might have misjudged the situation, and they realize that Crescent Claw actually saved the whole town, thinking the group was just being humble about their power. But looking at Gul'jin, someone wonders if this kid's praise won't make him have an overinflated ego again. Gul'jin starts talking to himself, agreeing that he really is as cool as the kid says. He is totally buying into his own hype, and the crowd keeps up the enthusiasm, cheering and shouting for their new heroes while celebrating the rescue, getting completely carried away. Gul'jin laughs and tells the kid he's absolutely right about how incredible he is, while Hannah chimes in smugly, reminding the townspeople that they are an official S-rank party, along with Larissa, and she adds that their whole mission is nothing more than a quest for the people, acting like true and noble adventurers. Gul'jin strikes a pose and shouts that there are people who need help waiting for them, so he tells the group that it's time to head to the guild. Inside the guild, the atmosphere is quite calm. The clerk is serving a regular customer at the counter, until the main doors burst open with a huge crash that catches the guild clerk completely off guard. The whole group stands there at the entrance with the light shining behind them, as if they were in some kind of play, and Gul'jin shouts a loud greeting to everyone inside, looking like he's ready to take on any job they have. Gul'jin leads the group to the counter and yells that they are the Crescent Claw. He demands an S-rank quest immediately, but the receptionist just looks at them calmly and asks them if they really are the 4 members of that party. She tells them she has a special message for the whole party, and with a big smile, she lets them know they aren't taking any quests. Instead, they will all be going back to training. The whole group freezes. Their faces go totally blank, as if they can't even process what she just said. They stand there by the counter for a long time without moving, making the other adventurers in line behind them wait. Hannah finally finds her voice and stammers something about training, while the burly squire loses his temper and asks what the hell is going on. Larissa also starts to panic, screaming, "Why does she have to do training now, just when they are supposed to be professionals?" The clerk doesn't budge and explains that they have been reported for behaving like jerks to merchants and acting like real newbies. She tells them they have to retake the beginner courses and pass a dungeon test with a guild assistant, or they will lose their licenses forever. Upon hearing that their entire career is on the line, the group looks completely defeated, as if their souls just left their bodies as they stand there in shock. The rest of the people in the guild start whispering and pointing at them, realizing that these heroes are really in big trouble. People nearby start murmuring about how the party has been messing up lately, which makes the rumors even worse, as others assume they caused that scene in the city earlier. And Hannah gets upset by all the rumors circulating, while the knight realizes how bad all this looks. The party is worried that Gul'jin will get depressed by the hate, but then he stands there with a creepy smile on his face. Laughing to himself, he starts acting like a total egomaniac, saying that what people say is nothing but noise, like birds chirping, and claims that having a gift means you just have to deal with people being jealous of you. In fact, he thinks everything is going to be fine, although to everyone else it's quite obvious that things are not going well at all. The clerk is unfazed by his act and asks them directly if they are going to start the training. Gul'jin continues acting like a hero, saying that all these problems are nothing more than a test destined for an S-class guy like him. In fact, the pressure is motivating him, and he yells at them to give him the beginner training course. He starts shouting that he's going to pass everything with flying colors, and claims the party will undoubtedly get a perfect score, trying to encourage the rest of the party to get moving so that Hannah admits she usually hates dealing with annoying things like this, but isn't one to stand idly by and accept defeat. The knight also gets fired up, saying that if they're going to do this, they might as well give it their all. And Larissa joins in, telling everyone to aim for that perfect score. Starting with the first greeting, Larissa encourages the group, telling everyone to get ready to start. And the whole group screams at the top of their lungs that they are ready for the training. And in the hands of the guild, it is honestly hard to know if the Crescent Claw has learned their lesson, or if they are just getting carried away by the moment, since they have no idea how brutal this training session is going to be. Everything is about to get much worse when a demon instructor appears for this hellish beginner's course. The beginner's training finally begins, and it's basically a technical session that the guild organizes for anyone who wants to become a member. Upon finishing the course, the guild officially certifies their skills and grants them a real rank. The room is packed with all kinds of people trying to climb in the world. Some are just looking for a life full of excitement, while others might be there for something completely different. The guild is being strict, targeting anyone who is about to lose their license due to their lousy behavior, which explains why there is such a strange mix of people crowded into the room, including the Crescent Claw, who are undoubtedly feeling the pressure, while someone in the crowd yells about the huge crisis everyone is facing. Hannah is sitting there trying to stay calm, thinking about how she ended up here just because she got involved in Gul'jin's drama. But the way everyone else in the room is staring at them is starting to drive her crazy. She tries to remind herself that she is a top-tier S-rank black mage, and she shouldn't have to put up with being stuck in a boring class with a bunch of newbies. The whole situation is a huge embarrassment for her, but then she looks around and sees something that makes her lose her cool completely. She snaps at her teammates, yelling at them because the knight Larissa and Gul'jin are really focused, and she wants to know why they are studying ahead like a bunch of goody two-shoes. Gul'jin is taking it too seriously, yelling at Hannah that, as S-rank members, basically they are required to get a perfect score, especially because he wants them to act as good role models for all the newbies around them. Larissa also chimes in a cheerful tone and suggests to Hannah that they should start reviewing questions from previous exams, like one that asks if it's okay to leave a dead monster in the forest without cleaning it up. Just because you're tired, Hannah stares at the page, overthinking the answer with a stressed look on her face. Finally, she loses it and yells that it's a shitty question, since it seems to her that any answer would be wrong anyway. Suddenly, a deep laugh from the front of the classroom interrupts her, making her stop and look up, where a smiling old man tells the group that, actually, he is impressed that they arrived early to study a bit. He introduces himself as Barian, the teacher for this beginner's course, and says it's a pleasure to meet them all. While the old man keeps laughing, Hannah sits there with her arms crossed, thinking he is a total loser. Varian points to the book on the table, bringing up that shitty question Hannah was just complaining about, and Hannah rests on her hand with a bored look. While saying that the answer is obviously false, Varian starts explaining the consequences of leaving a monster's corpse in the forest and shows how the smell of death and rot causes many problems since it spreads diseases and attracts even more terrifying monsters to the area. Varian adds that this doesn't just apply to cleaning up after a house. He tells them it's a complete mistake to stop collecting materials from a large monster, and that it's even worse to yell at a merchant who is willing to take the corpse off their hands. Varian laughs a little and tells the group that just fighting however they please makes them no different from any common thug. Now that the class has officially begun, he says they are going to start with the basics of what it means to be an adventurer. Gaius contemplates the night sky from his camp, wondering if his former teammates are okay. But he sits there silently by the fire while Sucre rests nearby. Suddenly, he realizes what he is doing and wonders why he is worrying about those people, since he remembers that they were the ones who kicked him out in the first place. And just thinking about the old days starts to piss him off, especially when memories of how they flirted with each other every chance they got come to mind. It was always the paladin and the black mage who were a couple, and the heavy squire. And the high priest also made a perfect couple, which was too cliché. Gaius complains to himself, wondering if item support masters in the rear just aren't liked by anyone. And finally, he yells that he also wants girls to like him. The nearby bushes start to rustle loudly, and Gaius immediately turns his head toward the noise. He squints, concentrating hard to see what's in the darkness. As someone approaches, he realizes the footsteps sound like those of a person rather than a monster. There is no hostility emanating from them either. A girl comes out and says she finally found him, calling him by his name as if she knew him well. Gaius looks at her, feeling that her face is familiar, but he doesn't quite recognize her. She introduces herself as Miria and asks if he still remembers her from before. Then he remembers. He remembers meeting her during a dungeon raid, when he saved her after she got separated from her old group. The campfire crackles between them as the night calms down, and the two sit by the flames to catch up on everything that has happened since the last time they saw each other. Miria tells him that, although when they met she was only a mage, she has actually trained to become a magic swordswoman. Now Miria looks at him and tells him she barely recognized him. It's clear he has become much stronger since the last time they saw each other. Gaius starts to wonder what brought her here. He mentions that an advanced class shouldn't have any reason to be in a beginner's forest, but she insists that she does have a reason, and he stands there completely stunned. While he waits for her to explain, Miriam starts to get very nervous and fidgets with her hands while she tries to speak. She looks him straight in the eyes, blushing hard, while she asks him if he would be willing to do something with her. And finally, she gets the words out and asks him if he would like to form a party together. Sucre the Mount lies on the grass, looking totally bewildered by the whole atmosphere. Meanwhile, Gaius stares at her with his mouth open, and finally he loses his cool and yells at her, asking why on earth she would want to team up with him. It's incredibly obvious to everyone that Miria likes Gaius because of how she's behaving. But Gaius stands there clueless. He hasn't noticed anything, even though Gaius always says he wants to be a popular guy. He's actually completely clueless when it comes to girls, and later, Instructor Berrien finishes at the blackboard and tells the class that the theory lesson is over. He explains that this afternoon they will move to the training field to conduct real combat practice. Berrien tells everyone to get some rest and make sure to be on time. Then the students head to eat. To the cafeteria, Gul'jin complains that the morning classes were so boring his head almost exploded, and he gets fired up and yells that he's undoubtedly going to stand out in this afternoon's combat section. Hannah just gives him a tired look, telling him that she already knows what he's going to say even before he says it. Hannah sits at the lunch table looking completely annoyed. She says that everyone in the room is looking down on them, outside the building. Gul'jin's voice rings out in the air as he tells his team to wait and watch, because he's going to make everyone realize what the true power of an S-rank is like during combat training. Later that same afternoon, a large white tarp covers a huge cage located in the grass-covered training field. Instructor Berrien stands in front of the class and explains that, for this exercise, they are going to release some captured magic beasts. He tells the students they shouldn't have any trouble handling them, but that, even so, they must remain totally focused and make sure not to let their guard down for a second. Gul'jin and the rest of the Crescent Claw group unsheathe their weapons and strike a pose. They are more than ready to show off. Berrien puts his hand on the tarp and says, "Well then," as he prepares to reveal the enemies, and yells at them to begin. Immediately, a pack of huge wolves shoots out of the cage toward the students. A pack of forest wolves launches an attack, but they are nothing more than cannon fodder for what's to come. Hannah stares at them with a serious expression, thinking that the others are greatly underestimating what she is capable of. She looks at the beasts and starts preparing her staff, thinking this is going to be easy, and she plans to let Ben, the heavy squire, lure them all in first with a provocation, so she can then fire against the whole group and burn them to ashes with her magic all at once. She activates her dark mage skill and fires a huge fire arrow directly at the pack. But Gul'jin suddenly jumps right into the line of fire, yelling that he's going to finish them off one by one. He keeps charging with his sword held high, ignoring the huge spell completely. That she just cast, Hannah turns completely pale while she tries to yell at him to wait. But it's too late. She yells that he's an idiot and tells him to get out of the way just as the fire explosion hits his position squarely. Gul'jin finally realizes the huge blast of fire heading his way, but he's already caught in the middle of the explosion. That completely envelops him while the magic hits the ground with a huge crash. Emerging from the smoke, looking disastrous, Gul'jin yells in surprise because he didn't expect to end up roasted. And now he jumps from side to side, yelling about how much it burns while the monsters just watch. Ben watches the chaos from the side, realizing that both Gul'jin and Hannah are trying to hit the same target, making the whole team look like a joke, as they are completely uncoordinated, and they don't know how to work as a team at all. And to make matters worse, he wonders why Larissa hasn't healed anyone yet. Hannah gets fed up with the lack of progress and decides that, if everyone is going to be so slow, she might as well finish the job herself. So she starts preparing a massive area magic spell to end the whole fight at once. As she stands there, and her staff starts to glow with all that overwhelming power, Hannah sees her chance and tells everyone that the target is that group right before launching a burst of flames. But Ben intervenes at the same time to use his heavy shield special skill, launching a colossal shield bash that kicks up a ton of dirt and debris, leaving Hannah standing there, looking quite proud of herself, until the smoke clears and shows two wolves charging directly through the chaos of the failed attack. Hannah sees the pack scattered everywhere and starts complaining to Ben because she had to finish them off. But her complaints cease quickly when she realizes she is alone, with the wolves growling behind her back. She starts shaking, realizing that, somehow, she has managed to attract a really uncomfortable amount of aggro from the monsters. And before she can even move, the wolves pounce directly on her with sharp teeth. She freezes as they approach, thinking to herself that this is getting really bad. But suddenly, a bright light dazzles her face, while Berrien just watches from behind as if nothing. The wolves are thrown back by a sudden flash of force that stops the attack. Hannah stands there looking up in total shock. She can't believe she is still intact, while Berrien holds his staff with a big smile on his face, looking completely relaxed. The instructor yells that the session is officially over. The group stands there next to the downed beasts, while Berrien chuckles and tells them they did a good job. He seems quite happy, but mentions that this level of strength is exactly what he would expect from an S-rank party. He continues by saying that their magic and the way they use their skills are, honestly, incredible, but then he pauses and says that, Although their power is great, their teamwork is simply terrible. The whole group looks quite embarrassed while he continues his sermon, explaining that it was a smart move to attract all those magic beasts with a provocation. But the problem started when the group didn't bother to talk or decide who was going to finish off which target first. Varian continues his sermon, pointing out that the vanguard never told the rear guard what the plan was, so the reinforcement never had a chance to synchronize. He explains that, since Larissa was so focused on preparing support magic for Ben, she couldn't react when things went sideways. Looking at the battlefield, he points out that jumping into a big attack just to show off actually ruined their teamwork, and in a real fight that would have been the end. It's clear they pay no attention to what their teammates are actually trying to do. Varian smiles as he gets to the crux of the matter, and tells them that the real reason their coordination is so bad is that Gaius has been coddling them all this time. The whole group stands there in shock as they process the words, and Hannah looks completely stressed out. Realizing how much they depended on the guy they kicked out, Varian doesn't give them time to lament. However, and he yells at them to stop standing there with their mouths open and start moving. He tells them not to leave the monster corpses lying on the ground. The instructor finishes by yelling at them to clean up the mess, reminding them that he already taught them how to do it in class. The crowd watching the training exercise starts murmuring and laughing at the disaster they just saw. A guy in the crowd says that the Crescent Claw was a total disaster, and mentions that, actually, he expected to learn something from them today. But now he jokes that the whole show has been nothing more than a magnificent example of what not to do. Another person adds that they bet the story about the party stopping a monster rampage in the city was also a total lie, which makes someone else point out how pathetic it is that they kicked out their allies only to end up looking like this. Hana hears the insults and says she doesn't want to end up being anyone's laughingstock. The party members hang their heads and walk away, while everyone around them keeps badmouthing them. And once they return, Gul'jin is still in shock, wondering if they really are S-rank. He asks if they really can't do anything without a newbie like Gaius around. Back in a room full of books and scrolls, Miria leans over her desk. Meanwhile, in the training fields, Varian looks at Hannah and tells her it's a shame. He points out that she is using high-level fire arrows without incantations or area of effect spells. And Varian explains that not even in the royal capital would you find a black mage who mastered that at her age. He tells her she must have focused so much on those spells that she has ignored the fundamentals of adventuring, and claims that her lack of balance is not really something worthy of praise. Hannah looks quite annoyed when he adds that talent is useless if it can't be used in a real fight. So she just mutters under her breath how much she hates old men who talk too much. Varian just laughs and says he's sorry he went on so long, but in her messy room, Miriam clutches the desk thinking that there is something unforgivable. Hannah narrows her eyes while repeating Varian's words, asking if Gallus has really spoiled them, questioning if the old instructor really believes they can't do anything by themselves. Later that night at their lodging, Larissa asks Hannah if she is okay, while Ben mentions that she has been locked in her room since they returned, which worries Larissa even more. Gul'jin shrugs, saying she's not the type to break down over something like this, and takes a sip of his drink while thinking about how well Varian knew how to handle her. At the end of the hallway, with heavy footsteps on the floor, Hannah murmurs how hateful that old Varian is. Before bursting through the door and shouting that it looks like everyone is there, she seems completely enthusiastic and announces that it is time to officially review today's teamwork, leaving Larissa and the guys looking at her surprised by her sudden burst of energy. A laugh echoes through the room, breaking the tense atmosphere, while Varian stands at the door asking if they are reviewing the lessons. And calling it admirable, the whole group stands there in deathly silence, staring at the old man. Suddenly, surprise hits them all at once, and everyone yells the teacher's name. Varian just smiles and tells them that he simply couldn't leave them alone, explaining that coming to see how they were doing was a decision he made on his own. He sits down with a tea and says he will watch their every move to evaluate their skills, and adds that, in fact, he is going to stay there with them for a while to bond. It turns out the group's performance in training was a total disaster, and now Hannah and the others are freaking out because their daily life with the demon instructor has officially begun. Gaius has no idea what is going on in his old home, so he just hangs out with Midia in the forest, and Sucre stands there, looking completely fed up with how cheesy and innocent their conversation is. As night falls, the question remains whether the paths of these old friends will ever cross again. And the next thing to look forward to is the revelation. Who is that demon instructor really? The scene shifts to a luxurious room where Gul'jin wakes up and tells himself, "Good morning," reminding himself that his name is Gul'jin and that he is the one in charge. He is the leader of the S-rank party called the Crescent Claw, and sits up to stretch, thinking that a top-rank adventurer has to stay on top even in the morning. He thinks that being an early bird is precisely what makes him better than everyone else. And then it's time to move on to the next part of his morning routine. Gul'jin decides to go back to sleep, burying his face in the pillow for what he calls an S-rank nap. He thinks to himself that taking the morning easy is a luxury reserved only for someone of S-rank like him, and he is not going to let anyone alter his daily routine. But just at that moment, the door bursts open and Varian gives them a big good morning to everyone, yelling at them to wake up and calling them all brats to get moving. Gul'jin and Hannah sit up in bed looking totally exhausted, completely bewildered by the wake-up call. Varian keeps smiling and tells them that the early bird gets 3 gold coins, and tells them to wake up and wash their faces because they have work to do before breakfast. Hannah gives a huge yawn and wonders what kind of work they could be doing, while they look at the pile of empty wooden crates and bundled bales waiting for them. Varian stands there with a big smile on his face, telling everyone that it's officially time to clean. The whole group looks completely exhausted, and Larissa asks if they really have to start cleaning as soon as they wake up. Hannah is not willing to accept it. She looks very annoyed and asks why they have to do things like this, pointing her finger at Varian and telling him he can't just barge in like that and start giving them orders that way. She launches into a little diatribe, explaining that her morning is supposed to start with a nice hot cup of tea, and that chores like cleaning should be handled by those who actually want to do them. Varian just laughs at her attitude, sarcastically, and comments on how elegant her lifestyle sounds while she walks away. But then a huge crash is heard coming from the other room. Everything starts rattling and catches Gaius, and Varian by surprise. Hannah is standing right in the doorway, completely paralyzed and terrified, staring into the void with a look of pure panic. While she weakly whispers something about her black tea, the room is a total disaster zone full of clutter and trash. While someone off camera admits they can't find anything, Varian starts yelling that good work only comes from a good lifestyle, which doesn't help Gul'jin and the others, who look completely miserable hearing that adventurers who live in disorder will never succeed at anything. Varian holds a rag and keeps lecturing the group, telling them that the first step is simply staying organized, because if they don't even know where their own gear is, they are basically wasting valuable treasure. Gul'jin is sweating bullets while trying to sort a box of heavy swords, looking like he's about to reach his limit, while Ben stares at some random crowned skull, and Larissa tries to organize a mountain of potions. Hannah finally loses it and starts screaming, throwing her hands in the air while junk flies everywhere around her. Ben looks totally defeated and says he doesn't see the end, while the rest of the group lies passed out on the floor. Larissa is in shock and asks Gaius if he really used to handle all this gear all by himself. Varian continues his sermon, telling the group that cleaning and keeping things organized is a daily job. But it's not a total monster, so he tells them they don't have to do it all at once, decides that they have done enough for now, and suggests they finally sit down for breakfast while they eat. Gul'jin realizes the reality of the situation and asks the girls if he really left everything to Gaius, but someone else at the table mocks by saying that Gaius was already doing all that on his own. They keep going, yelling that there is no reason for any of them to feel grateful for what he did. Gul'jin just looks at his plate, silently for a second, while he thinks about his former teammate. He looks into the void, wondering what kind of life Gaius is living right now. Meanwhile, Gaius is walking through a busy square when he hears someone call his name. It's Miria, and she is very excited to finally see some of those legendary shopping techniques of the item master. Miria is very upbeat and tells Gaius she is going to be watching his every move. All he can do is let out a nervous chuckle as they set off. It turns out Miria has a specific dungeon she wants to clear, and that is the real reason she wanted Gaius in her party. Gaius realizes he must have made a big impression when his former party, the Crescent Claw, saved them both, but Miria gets serious and tells him that. Even then, she already had a bad feeling about how his former party treated him. Gaius is taken by surprise, which makes Miria rethink and wonder if she is acting weird. But she keeps going, pointing out that setting up a camp is usually a job for the whole party, not just for one guy. She lists everything he was doing, the tents, the cooking fire, and even the mounts, and how he managed to do it all by himself. Gaius thinks about it for a moment and admits that Yes, now that she mentions it, in the end he ended up doing it all by himself. He rubs the back of his neck and says that, since he didn't have much power in a fight, he thought he should at least take care of the chores. But Miriam doesn't buy it and yells at him that dealing damage isn't the only thing that counts in a fight. Midia starts listing everything he did in the fight, the object support, breaking the enemy's spells, and giving the signal for all the combos, and tells him bluntly that his support was, in fact, perfect. Gallus stands there absorbing it, while Midia lowers her gaze, in a rather sad tone, and admits that, honestly, she doesn't understand why a guy like him was fired. A long silence ensues between them as they walk along the stone path. Finally, Gaius shrugs. He laughs a little and jokes that maybe he was just in the way, because the rest of the party members were hooking up. But Miriam just looks at him, completely surprised that he can take it so naturally. She asks if he is serious, which makes Gaius wonder if his perspective is really that strange. Miriam says nothing more. She just looks at him with a worried expression, as if she were seeing something new, thinking to herself that Gaius is definitely a bit out of the ordinary in his own way. It's almost as if, seeing him walk down the street, she realizes that he acts like someone who long ago stopped trusting people. The two head to a local second-hand shop called Kirov, where the clerk is busy working behind the counter, until he notices someone entering and gives them an informal welcome. He looks up and gets excited to see who it is, saying he hasn't seen Miria in a long time, and then asks if she has finally found a new teammate. Miria gives him a big smile and says that's right. She introduces the hooded boy as her superior, who is going to help her complete the dungeon. Gaius stays quiet in his disguise, just looking at some of the potion bottles on the shelves. But the shop owner stops what he's doing and stares at the hooded boy for a long second. The old man finally speaks to get his attention, and Gallus looks like he's about to lose his cool, when the clerk looks him straight in the eyes and asks if it really is Gallus hiding under that hood. And all the room stays silent for a moment as they stare at each other. So Gallus finally gives up and takes off the invisibility mask. Asking the guy how he noticed the secret is out. Gallus was wearing a distortion hood that alters the way people see him. But the shopkeeper wasn't fooled at all. Gallus adjusts his shirt collar and admits that the old man is still in top form. The clerk points out that the only reason he knew was because Gallus is too good at choosing items, and tells the boy to keep his head up, since he definitely didn't leave his old party by a mistake then. The old man teases him for leaving Miria behind while he looks at the gear, which makes her turn red as a tomato. He tells them they need to talk and shop like a team, which catches Gaius a bit off guard. So Gaius stops what he's doing to apologize to Miria, while the clerk watches them with a smile. Gaius starts including her, asking if this particular ether is the right choice for a magic swordsman's mana recovery. Miria seems genuinely happy that he asked her. She gives him a big smile and tells him it's perfect. By the time they are finished, they have piled a huge stack of supplies on the store counter. Gaiu leans over the counter and asks the shopkeeper how much all that pile of stuff costs. The clerk starts sorting the bottles, mentioning that Gaiu certainly has a good eye for high-end items that veterans like. He starts counting it all up, checking the high-level potions, the ethers, the antidotes, and the scrolls. As Gallus waits for the blow, the old man tells him the whole lot will cost him 6 gold coins. Gallus looks at the items and admits that the price is a bit high for him, but then his face lights up with a cunning look, clearly determined to haggle to get a better deal. He mentions that lately the city has been flooded with a bunch of novice adventurers, and then he berates the independent for his business problems. The guy is probably having trouble selling his gear for veterans while trying to target novices. Gallus asks the old man to have mercy and give him a discount, pointing out that, since he is taking all that dead stock off his hands at once, he should get a discount. Gallus puts his hands together and puts on his best pleading face, asking the shopkeeper if he can get a small discount. But it's not just any request. He activates his special item master skill, called negotiation, to close the deal. The pressure affects the shopkeeper a lot, leaving him sweaty and looking like he's trapped in some kind of mental trap. The guy finally loses his cool. He grabs his head and yells at Gallus to stop using that crazy skill on him. He gives up and says he will give him the discount if Gallus just stops, while Miria watches how everything unfolds. Once the deal is closed, the gold coins are placed on the counter next to the box of supplies. But while they pack up, the clerk mentions that the Crescent Claw hasn't been doing very well since Gallus left. That grabs Gallus's attention immediately, so he turns around and asks if something has happened to his former party. The clerk looks at him as if he were crazy and asks how it is that he hasn't heard the news yet. leaving Gallus standing there, completely lost, having no idea what mess his former party has gotten into. The clerk leans toward him and asks Gallus if he really left behind every single item he managed for the party. Gallus looks at the barrels of gear and says it's not a big deal, since all of that belonged to the party anyway. He mentions that there were some basic camping supplies and a few rare items that are difficult to use. But since they aren't novices, he assumes they can handle the inventory on their own, leaving the clerk staring at him while Miria watches. Quite stressed by how naive he is being, the clerk laughs while Miria tries to explain the situation, and then the guy finally decides to tell him everything. Gallus is about to hear the truth about his former party. It turns out the Crescent Claw has fallen into a pitiful state since they kicked him out of the party, and now their reputation in the city is completely in the gutter. After that disastrous beginner's training session, Gallus stands there with his eyes wide open, totally surprised by how quickly things have gone to pot without him. Miriam stands there listening to the news, and she honestly can't believe how absurd all of this is. Gallus starts to panic. He thinks it's impossible for an S-rank party to be so unorganized, especially because during the handover, they acted like everything was going to be fine. But now he realizes that maybe they kicked him out without having a single plan. The clerk tells him he doesn't have to worry about his reputation, because everyone in the city knows the truth. In fact, his former party is going through a rough patch right at this very moment. The guy explains to him that Master Barian has gone to the guild to personally instruct the party, and Gallus seems to have seen a ghost. He knows perfectly well how brutal Barian's training sessions can be. He lets out a deafening scream that can be heard from outside the tent, going completely crazy at the news. Meanwhile, Barian is quietly laughing to himself, looking like he's having a great time. As the boxes of equipment and potions are finally organized, it has taken all day, but everything is starting to be in order. Barian tells the group that combat training starts tomorrow, so they need to get some rest. But first, he wants them to get up and recover their energy while he hums. He suggests organizing a drinking party that also serves as a welcome party. Even though the table is full of random bottles and a little plain bread, Larissa and Ben return from their supply run very excited. Hannah just looks at a bottle and complains that it's nothing but cheap alcohol. She says now that they are an S-rank party, they shouldn't drink this anymore. Larissa reminds her that they are broke from having bought that bag of items and having paid for the scrap collection, plus they still can't accept S-rank quests to get the money back. Galgan lowers his head and says they will have to live on a tight budget for a while. Hannah examines her drink closely, wondering if she will even like this cheap drink that S-rankers down in one go just to get drunk. She starts listing all the stress, exhaustion, and total humiliation of being stuck in a beginner's course with an old man. And then she decides to drink it in one gulp to deal with all that anxiety. She stops for a second to savor the drink, and someone shouts a toast for having made it through another day. The whole group clinks their mugs, toasting to all the effort they have put in. Guljan seems quite impressed and tells Professor Varian that the old man holds his liquor very well, which makes Varian laugh and say that he is not yet willing to let a bunch of youngsters outdrink him. Varian takes another big drink, enjoying how good the alcohol tastes after a long day of cleaning work, thinking to himself that, once the kids are a little tipsy, he will be able to start being nice to them to win them over. He plays the role of the kind old man telling the group that, even though Gaius messed up, he is still a young boy with plenty of time ahead to mature, and all the group members burst into laughter, joking about how the fact that Gallus is a bit of a disaster actually makes him quite likable. Varian's eyes sharpen for a split second, and he decides it's time to get the truth out of them before the alcohol wears off. He sets aside the informal chat for a moment to ask the group what really happened, specifically why they decided to kick Gallus out, which causes a mug to hit the table. As the tone of the conversation starts to change, Guljan just smiles with a drunken smirk and says that, honestly, the guy was just getting in their way. Varian sits there with his usual smile, simply listening to what they say, while Hannah intervenes to show her agreement, saying that, given that Gaius is just a novice item master, he was never really at their level to begin with. Guljan is already feeling the effects of the alcohol. He leans back next to Hannah and complains that there was only one boy living with two couples, to which Hannah responds by raising her hands in the air and yelling that Gaius was just a huge nuisance. Larissa is curled up next to Ben, blushing while adding that even when they went camping, things were awkward, admitting that she was always worried that Gaius might be eavesdropping on them, and that she just couldn't stand it, because it made her feel very uncomfortable all the time. Varian keeps his friendly smile, but inside he thinks he has to push them to get more details out of them. So he asks naturally what kind of tasks they ended up leaving for Gallus. If he was so useless, Hannah starts listing his tasks, raising her voice when mentioning things like taking care of the mounts and setting up camp, and she continues listing collecting items, handling potions, shopping, cleaning, and doing the laundry, before finally yelling that he even had to take care of getting rid of the magical beast. Hannah keeps ranting, yelling about how slow Gallus was at his job, and saying that he should have taken care of all the dismantling in his free time. Gul'jin intervenes again with a red face, yelling that the guy was always getting in the way, and that he was completely inconsiderate of the rest. He continues his diatribe, yelling that if Gallus was accumulating so many items all that time, he could at least have opened his mouth and said something, while Larissa intervenes from the side, blushing as she calls Gaius a closet pervert. The whole group joins in to tell Varian that they are the only reason the party managed to reach S rank, especially with a rookie holding them back, and they keep yelling that he should have done his damn job properly, like any normal item master would. Varian sits there with a calm smile, while the group members around him keep laughing and drinking, but as he listens to them talk, he begins to realize that these guys might really be a lost cause. After all, his expression remains polite, but inside he has already decided that he is going to have to force some common sense into them, which leads to a brief note for the readers, confirming that even Master Varian is totally furious at the way they are behaving. The narration points out that the Crescent Claw is in for some absolutely brutal training from the Master after this. So for now, everyone should probably just let them be with a click of their tongue while they enjoy their last moments of peace. Empty wine, bottles, and mugs are scattered all over the tavern table when Gul'jin leans in, calling out to Varian and asking the old man if he is paying attention to the story. While his face gets even redder from the drinks, he tells the instructor that he might be seriously underestimating what they are capable of. He doesn't stop talking, boasting about all the work they have been doing lately, and he starts to recall their great death match against the Red Cyclops, claiming they were the first A-rank group to achieve a victory against a monster like that back in the day. Memories keep surfacing as he talks about that time. They wiped out an entire nest of hobgoblins, showing how they always took care of the nasty, dirty jobs that no other adventurer even wanted to touch. Gul'jin doesn't stop boasting about their past victories, shouting how they defeated the basilisk lord of the abyssal cave, and how they completely wiped out the poison dungeon. He claims they are not just muscles, but that they also have the brains to match something Larissa. And Ben totally agree with he encourages them, yelling that their S rank is not by chance. And Gul'jin starts raising his voice even more as the alcohol takes its toll. He screams that their teamwork is authentic suddenly. He turns around to ask Gaius to back up the story. He looks over his shoulder, but just stares at the empty space where his former teammate used to be. Hannah realizes he is acting strangely. She looks at him with a worried face and asks if he is getting too drunk. While Ben laughs from behind, he tells the group that it is impossible for Gaius to be here. Gul'jin lets out a forced laugh and tells everyone he was just joking, doing everything he can to hide how uncomfortable he feels. He takes another big drink from his mug, wondering why it had seemed like Gaius was still there with them. Gallus starts to recall everything that happened and realizes that perhaps things weren't exactly as he remembered them, since he was always there in the middle of the chaos, even facing goblins and monsters without hesitation, while the rest of the team realizes that his support was actually the secret to all the victories they had achieved. Back at the table, Hannah gets a little drunk and admits that Gallus really put in a lot of effort, and Ben joins the conversation, exclaiming how impressive it was that a rookie could actually keep up with them. While Larissa starts to wonder if things went beyond that, Gul'jin seems totally stressed, while he mutters that Gaius probably saved him more than once. But the atmosphere is instantly broken when a hand slams hard on the table, splashing drinks everywhere. Gul'jin loses his temper and yells at everyone to stop complaining about the boy they kicked out, with his face beet red, because he claims they are ruining the taste of the alcohol with all that talk. He stands there yelling at his teammates, leaving Larissa and Ben completely stunned, while Hannah only looks annoyed, and Varian watches the whole scene crumble. Gul'jin stands there, completely nervous and blushing, unable to articulate a complete sentence. Suddenly, he yells that he is going to check on the Draconics before running out the door, leaving everyone else behind. While Miriam watches with a face of total anger and asks what is wrong with him, Varian just smiles and reminds her that, actually, Gul'jin was the first to mention Gallus's name. And outside, the moon hangs high among the clouds. When the night falls silent for a moment, Gul'jin stumbles through the grass, grumbling to himself that he has definitely had too much to drink, but tries to hide it by thinking he is still in control. Summing up to himself to be responsible enough to check on the mounts, he continues to praise himself, thinking about how considerate he is for doing this, while he starts to imagine what Gallus would think of him, even going as far as asking out loud if Gallus would agree. This brings back a memory of Gallus from a long time ago, looking over his shoulder, and asking Gul'jin, how is it going? Gallus and Gul'jin are back in the stables with their mounts. The whole memory glows, as Gul'jin yells that everyone is going to the tavern to celebrate that they have finally reached S rank. But Gaius just tells him to go ahead, and that he will join the group later. Gul'jin tries to convince him to come with him, arguing that the Draconics can wait for once, although Gaius doesn't give in, saying that he doesn't feel right if he skips his routine at this moment, because he really believes that good work always comes from having a good life, and reminds Gul'jin to never neglect the fundamentals of work. Gul'jin leaves, calling him too moralistic, while Gaius just warns him not to stay out until too late. Back in the present, Gul'jin finds himself alone in the dark, blushing at remembering that, and finally confesses to himself that the alcohol is definitely starting to affect him fully. The alcohol is really playing a trick on Gul'jin. Honestly, it seems as if Gallus were right there. With that same old hood and as calm as he used to be, Gul'jin stares into the void, remembering how Gallus was always out here taking care of the Draconics. Around those times, he thinks of all those boring daily tasks that every adventurer is supposed to do, and about how Gallus just smiled and took care of everyone else's share of the work without complaining once. The weight of everything finally starts to affect him, and it looks like he is about to break down. He bows his head to the shadow of his old friend, thanking him and apologizing for everything, standing there in the silence of the night, while guilt keeps welling up. He knows that these are the words he should have said while he was sober, instead of waiting until now. But Gaius's image remains silent, leaving Gul'jin alone with his thoughts in the dark. It turns out it's not an illusion. The real Gallus appeared because he was worried and wanted to see how everyone was doing. And seeing Gul'jin like this has left him completely bewildered. Gul'jin just mutters to himself, wondering what is happening right now. But Gallus cannot believe what he is hearing. He never thought he would live to hear words like, "Thank you" or "I'm sorry" come out of Gul'jin's mouth. A deathly silence falls between them for a second. Gul'jin stands there staring, while Gallus watches him from under his hood. And Gul'jin is so drunk that he is convinced that the image of Gallus standing in front of him is just a hallucination that won't go away. He tells himself that he must still be drunk while he stares at his old friend, without realizing at all that he is actually there. He keeps insisting that it's impossible for Gallus to be there at that moment, so he just looks down, trying to shake off the vision. He keeps repeating that it's impossible, and that Gallus would never return to the party after everything that had happened. Gallus stands there listening to him, and the wind blows through the trees under the stars, leaving them both in the quiet night. Gul'jin starts to shiver and complain about how much he is freezing out here. Basically, he is done for tonight and wonders if he shouldn't go back and keep drinking. He walks away, leaving Gaius there alone under the stars, looking at the night sky. But then someone quickly approaches and puts a sword to his throat, catching him completely off guard. He doesn't even have time to react before the person calls him an intruder for loitering at night. Gaius starts to sweat, but recognizes the voice and says to the guy, "Long time no see." It turns out the man is Varian, and Gaius addresses him as master. Varian just smiles and tells Gaius that, in fact, he also wanted to talk to him. Gaius finds himself trapped between Miria and his former instructor, realizing that he has just gotten himself into a really awkward situation. Cold sweat is breaking out on him, clearly stressed about what will come next. Gaius stands there looking quite tense as the night progresses, and things start to heat up, with rumors of undead monsters prowling in the dark. Varian and Gallus look at each other under the stable roof. Varian laughs and tells Gallus to relax and not get so tense. He takes a good look at his former student and tells him that it seems that, actually, he is doing quite well. Varian smiles, thinking about how youth is about knowing and eventually leaving behind friends of your own age. He mentions that it seems Gallus has been spending a lot of time lately with a rather intense group. And strong-willed, Gallus remembers his time with Crescent Claw and admits it's true. Apologizing for all the problems they have caused, Varian gets straight to the point and says he assumes Gallus has come because he has something that worries him. Gallus stays silent for a second. With his gaze lowered, Barian mentions that he has heard about all the mess the group caused during the guild training, and about the uproar they caused in the city, which leads Gallus to ask him if he is referring to the time the Draconics went crazy. It turns out there are serious risks when a Draconix is ignored or mistreated by its riders, even if they seem domesticated. Once a magical beast like that starts to go crazy, the uproar itself is just the beginning of the problems, because the true threat is much more disgusting and terrifying than that. The scent of a stressed Draconix attracts higher-level monsters from everywhere. In the worst case, that scent can even attract a dragon to the city. Varian laughs a little and says, given that the shop owner had given them so much trouble, the group was at least doing the bare minimum to keep the animals calm. So it seems that everyone managed to avoid a total nightmare situation. This time, Gaius just stares at his hand on the table, thinking that the bare minimum is all he can expect from them. Gaius stands there with a shovel over his shoulder, ready to get to work. He digs the shovel deep into the ground to clear the area. While he works, he thinks about cleaning out the dirty straw and figuring out what food each animal likes best. But despite all that effort, he feels he still has a lot to improve. Barian laughs and says he can't believe the rest of the group left all this work for Gallus to do alone. So Gallus admits it's mostly because he has completely lost hope of them giving him a hand. Barian watches him work for a second. Thoughtfully, he says that all this reminds him of the great subjugation battles of the old days. He points out that, back then, Gallus used to always meddle in other people's affairs, and it would go to his head, and Gallus just laughs, remembering how his master gave him a good scolding after that. Varian's voice from the past echoes, telling Gallus to never meddle in someone else's territory. He explains that you can never fully master your own field, so you have to keep pursuing it. And above all, you must always show respect to the people around you. Back in the present, Barian realizes that Gaius really took those old teachings to heart. So Gaius looks away and admits that they really should have collaborated on basic tasks, like cooking or cleaning. He lets out a small smile and mentions that he only did all that because he thought it was what his master had taught him. But Varian just sighs and lets the rest explain it. The group should have been able to manage on their own up to that point. Honestly, it's not even worth talking about, as it's common sense. He finishes by saying that it's never a good idea to take it for granted that things will work out, which leaves Gaius alone under the full moon, thinking that maybe he also has to start changing the way he acts. Barian tells Gallus not to worry too much about things, and mentions that Gallus probably should have stood up more firmly to his former teammates. But he promises that he himself will take care of whipping the crescent claw into shape. Gallus just laughs nervously as he thinks about the brutal training that awaits his old group. So he realizes that it's pretty mind-blowing that his own master is the commander of logistics support for the Royal Knights. He asks Varian to take full credit for what has happened, and explains to him that things will get too complicated if people find out he was responsible for everything. Varian walks away, joking about how young people and their complicated problems are a complete mystery. He makes one last offer, telling Gallus that he has a job waiting for him at the royal palace, to which Gallus just nods in silence while he looks into the distance. Miria watches the two talk with a calm smile on her face. Gallus turns around and explains that first he has to keep a promise he made to someone, but he says that once he is finally alone, he will think about the job. Varian just nods, saying he understands, and later that night under the full moon, a voice calls out to the master. Varian stands at the door, scratching his head, and tells whoever is there to leave the rest of the mess to them. Looks down at the members of the Claw. The crescent moon passed out all over the floor and sighs at how complicated young people can get. The next morning dawns at the mansion, and Gul'jin is still lying on his back, looking like he is barely surviving the start of the day. This guy is supposed to be the legendary leader of the S-rank group, the Claw of the Crescent Moon, but right now he is nothing but a total mess. Varian leaves, joking that what Gul'jin is feeling is a true S-rank hangover. Gul'jin struggles with all his might, trying to convince himself that a legendary S-rank guy like him shouldn't succumb to a hangover. But he is barely conscious when Varian suddenly appears at the door. The old man waves and yells at everyone to wake up once and for all. Varian has a huge smile on his face as he lets them know it's officially time for the morning cleaning. Hannah can't believe they have to do this again today, while Larissa rubs her eyes, saying she is too sleepy for this. Varian doesn't care and tells them not to get cocky just because they managed to get everything in order for one day. He walks past the empty bottles on the floor and warns them that, if they keep partying like this, They are going to get hit hard, while Ben and the others start putting the trash into bags. Varian reminds them that there are no days off in everyday life. He points to the door and tells Ben and Hannah to take the work outside. So they all head to the stables, where Varian announces that he is going to teach them the fundamentals of dragon care. The lesson starts with some gross details. Varian explains that if the beast gets sick from eating things it shouldn't, its pee will give it away. Varian continues the lesson, explaining that if they don't keep up with everything, the smell of excrement and sweat is going to get pretty nasty. Miria looks at Gallus, clearly annoyed by the air in the stables, and asks him if he really doesn't notice the stench. Gallus just repeats the word as if he had never heard it before, while Miria admits that she thought that was how things were supposed to smell. He starts wondering if the others are feeling sick or something, because he hasn't noticed anything weird at all. But Varian stands in front of him with a serious look and tells him that his observation skills have been starting to fail lately. He points to the draconics in the stable and warns them that underestimating the care these creatures need is going to cost them dearly. Given the increasingly tense atmosphere, Varian decides it's time to tell them a specific story, a cautionary tale about the dark future that awaits anyone who decides to neglect their basic obligations. He starts ranting about tragedies and disasters, telling them that they must take full responsibility for their work before things go wrong, leaving Gallus and Miria standing there in silence, looking completely stressed by the old man's intense talk. Hannah watches while Gul'jin struggles with the farming equipment, commenting on how much this feels like real hard work. Varian doesn't relent, however, and reminds them that Gallus used to take care of all this work by himself. He tells them bluntly that, since they decided to kick him out, they are the ones who have to step up and take responsibility. Later, a simple meal of soup and bread is served at the table, but between the exhausting work and a horrible hangover headache, neither of them feels like eating. They sit there looking at the food, feeling nothing but frustration and regret for how things have turned out. Gul'jin is practically dazed. His mind is a chaos of strange emotions, and his body is totally exhausted, leaving Hannah in exactly the same situation. Since both are thinking the same thing about their current situation, the problem is that, even though both feel miserable, they can't say it out loud. Gul'jin just sighs to himself, thinking that, even though he is rusty, his pride as an S-rank member doesn't allow him to admit that he can't handle this. Back at the table, Gul'jin looks at the ceiling and sighs, wishing Gallus were still there to take care of everything for them. Hannah and Ben sit there looking completely wrecked. It seems their pride is starting to crack, literally. And on this day, the sound of someone's ego shattering resonates throughout the building. Meanwhile, at the camp, Gallus yells that it's time to get going, regardless of whether the world heard that pride breaking or not. He tells Miria that they have finally finished gathering all the items they need, and now that Miria's mount has joined them, the two draconics are ready for the trip. Gallus looks at the path ahead and says it's finally time to get going. He suggests they break camp immediately so they can start heading toward the dungeon. He starts moving so fast that he is basically in 3 places at once, gathering everything while Miria stands there. Totally surprised, she watches him work like a machine. He is making the whole process seem too easy. Miria stands there with a huge pout, visibly annoyed because Gallus is carrying all the bags by himself. She calls his name to get his attention, and he turns, looking a bit nervous about what she is about to say. Next, she puts on a serious look and tells him that doing things like this simply isn't going to work. She gives him a huge smile and tells him they should do it together, which catches Gallus completely off guard. She leans toward him and asks if he agrees, making him blush and smile awkwardly while he stammers a yes next to the mounts. It's clear that just waiting around isn't the way to express your feelings. No, just waiting definitely won't work if you want someone to understand you. So Miria finally takes the big step and makes her move, and Gallus accepts her offer without a second thought. Gallus and Miria set off together, and it seems the seeds of trust are finally starting to grow. As they head into the forest to begin their training, Gallus points out that they don't really know how the other fights yet, and suggests they go to some hunting grounds to test the waters. Miria totally agrees, saying that, in fact, she had been wanting to show him what she is capable of for a while. But Gallus looks a bit uncomfortable and tells her she just has to follow his directions during the fight. He gets serious for a moment and tells her she has to do exactly what he says, clarifying that, although she is normally free to make her own decisions on the fly, she has to listen as soon as she hears his voice. He looks at her and tells her he needs a promise about it, and she simply gives him a smile back. Miria gives him a big smile and says, of course she will listen to him, and adds that it's simply because she trusts Gallus. Miria thanks him for the opportunity, so Gallus tells her it's time to get going. Gallus goes ahead on his mount, advancing quickly through the trees, while looking back to tell Miria that she is doing a great job keeping up with him. Miria just laughs and tells him he better not underestimate her skills. It seems like she is having a great time riding through the forest, until they finally stumble upon the entrance of a dark, rocky cave hidden in the forest. Gallus gets serious again and tells her not to let her guard down, and suggests they keep talking to coordinate while they go in, to which Miria agrees. Gallus and Miria ride directly into the dark cave, venturing into the shadows as the forest light fades. The rocky entrance remains silent among the trees, and then, suddenly, two bright white eyes appear in total darkness. But back in the forest, these tall and undulating shadow monsters spring up from the ground. One of the shadows begins to slide back into the earth with a strange sound. It disappears completely, leaving only one of the creatures standing there, while it observes the clearing from the center of the forest. Completely alone, moving to the village, everything seems quite normal and quiet on the streets, which lead to an elegant balcony, from where someone seems to be watching from above. Back on the elegant balcony, a silhouette stands by the window, simply watching as the long-haired man takes a sip of his tea, and asks what the situation is. He leans back in his chair, looking totally relaxed while he listens to the report, nodding his head and saying he understands, especially regarding the dungeons with the special variants. One of those strange shadow monsters is right there, in the room with him, and he just laughs, telling the creature that, in fact, it has become quite impressive. He gets up and looks out the window, saying he wants to test his power a bit more, and mentions that he could even make that dungeon a bit more difficult as he goes out for a walk. He tells the shadow monster it can withdraw, and the creature begins to sink into the floor, disappearing while he gives it one last order to keep him informed of everything that is happening. The mysterious man stands there with a grim smile on his face, thinking to himself about how Gallus has grown. And now he looks delicious. He realizes that everything Gallus did in the outside world was really important, but he wants Gallus to remember that running away is no longer an option. His eyes become really intense as he says that he will undoubtedly go after him, so he better wait. And he caresses his face while he calls Gallus his little precious favorite. The voice keeps echoing Gallus's name through the quiet town, floating just over the roof of the local inn, where everything is a mess. Inside, Gul'jin and his gang are face down on the table, completely wrecked. Varian just laughs at them and tells them to get up because they are leaving today. Varian gives a big smile and tells the group that the time has finally come to unleash all that hidden power. But Gallus and Miria sit at the table, looking like they haven't slept in days. Outside the building, it is announced that combat training is officially beginning, and Ben is already wearing his gear, looking much more excited than he probably should be. He tells himself he is not going to let Gallus take all the glory and remain the protagonist, while Gul'jin stands there looking impeccable, totally focused on proving that they still deserve that S-rank title. Hannah and Larissa are right behind them, looking serious and ready to get real results this time. The weather is perfect as clouds drift over the training field, and Ben starts shouting at the top of his lungs that they are going to crush this training, with Gul'jin joining him, yelling at the wolves of the forest to come and get him, because he is ready for anything. The group looks at a field full of rows of wooden training mannequins, and Larissa can't believe what they see, asking Varian if this is some kind of joke. Since they are supposed to be professionals, Varian leans on the fence and tells them he can't pull magical beasts out of thin air. So they start with mannequins first, which makes Hannah feel like they are being completely disrespected. Gul'jin tells the rest of the group to hurry up and get this over with, while Varian just laughs and says that, actually, he is looking forward to seeing what they are capable of. He drops an hourglass on the table and gives them 3 minutes to knock down the target, and then yells at them to start getting into combat position immediately. Larissa starts reciting a spell to increase speed while Hannah prepares her fire shot. Scatter and Ben charges straight ahead, yelling that leading the attack is exactly what he is there for. Larissa finishes her chant and sends a wave of support magic toward Gul'jin, who gets ready to move, feeling the boost of the acceleration Larissa just gave him, and decides he can use this boost to flank the targets from the side opposite to where Ben is charging, intending to wipe them all out with a sudden and quick attack. As he crosses the field at full speed toward the group of training mannequins, Hannah watches him and can't believe her eyes, saying he is moving too fast for her. But just then, a huge explosion shakes the air, and someone yells at Gul'jin to get out of the way, leaving him completely stunned, As he looks toward the sudden explosion he didn't see coming, he sees another one heading straight for him and starts to lose his cool, wondering how this is happening again. Just as the energy hits the ground and explodes into a huge cloud of smoke and fire, Gul'jin starts flailing and cursing as he tries to escape before getting caught in the chaos. Gul'jin realizes that he has remained completely frozen in the middle of the chaos. He grinds his teeth, telling himself that he has to get his act together right now, or he will fail. So he lets out a huge shout and puts all the strength he has left into one last desperate blow. He and Ben crash into the training mannequin at exactly the same time, and their weapons crash into the wood with a loud crack. They both freeze, eyes wide and totally surprised by the disaster they just caused with their lack of coordination. Varian yells at them from the side of the field, telling them that's enough for today, while Hannah and Larissa stand there watching the disaster. The training mannequin is left alone on the field, barely holding on after the tough training session. The group members lower their heads and start walking back toward the fence, feeling the weight of how badly things are going. And Varian meets them there, mentioning how, in reality, they have managed to work together as a true team up to this moment. He looks at them and asks what they think is missing at this moment, specifically what is missing, and is causing them to fall apart, which makes Hannah stare at the ground, sweating while she wonders if the missing piece is actually Gallus. Varian looks at the sky with a calm smile and tells the group that their assumption is only partially correct. Ben stands there, completely lost, asking what exactly it was that Gallus was doing for them. While Larissa tries to think about it, Ben stares into the void and says that he too is starting to wonder. Gul'jin looks down as he remembers and finally realizes that Gallus was giving them instructions. He remembers the whole group gathered in those days when things actually worked. Gul'jin repeats the idea of giving orders out loud as if it were a totally new concept that he just understood. He looks focused again and tells the rest of the team that they have to review how they moved, pointing out how Ben used to start every fight by attacking from the right side. Then he remembers how Hannah always followed that up by casting a massive area of effect spell. And at the same time, Larissa made sure to cast a speed boost buff on Gul'jin to maintain the momentum. Gul'jin keeps remembering their old rhythm, remembering how he waited for the right boost before attacking from the side opposite to Ben. The truth starts to sink in for the whole group now, as they realize that each one was acting on their own based on their own judgment. So it was only a matter of time before they started getting in each other's way and clashing. Gul'jin finally understands and admits that the only reason they could fight perfectly without any problems before was because Gallus was always there, analyzing the entire battlefield and giving them the orders they needed to stay together. Varian lets out a satisfied smile and says to Gul'jin, "It seems you have finally matured enough to realize that and express it in words." Gul'jin takes a second to take it all in and then says that from now on, what they really have to do is. Hannah intervenes and explains that they have to start communicating with each other and be clear about which targets they are attacking. Larissa seems excited as she adds that they must pay attention to how each one moves so they can read the situation and create true teamwork. Ben stands there with a big smile, totally in agreement with the new plan. The Crescent Claw group gathers in the clearing, finally in sync, and looking like they are ready. Gul'jin looks ahead with a serious expression, admitting that it won't be easy, but that they have to learn to move like a real team. Meanwhile, nearby, Miria watches them with a calm smile, thinking to herself that she is not yet ready to face Gallus. The whole group cheers up, with the girls shouting that they can do it and Gul'jin encouraging everyone to give their best. Varian just laughs at their energy, telling them he likes that spirit, and warns them that he will keep them training for as many days as necessary until they do it right. And the group shouts their agreement. The scene changes to a rocky cliff where the situation is already becoming tense, because a pack of goblins comes charging out with weapons raised. And screaming while they look for an opening, Miria doesn't hesitate for a second. She jumps high into the air and lands right on top of them, and as she begins to make her way through the pack, Gallus yells that he's got her back. Miria keeps moving, making her way through the monsters while shouting that they have to wipe out the whole group they've lured here all at once. Gallus responds by yelling that he'll take care of it. His boots hit the ground hard as he gets into position. Miria jumps very high into the air to stay above the chaos and keep the pressure on. In fact, she lets out a little laugh, clearly satisfied with how the fight is going while she keeps the pack distracted. Gaius goes up the rocky ridge to get a clear line of sight. He draws his bow, fixes his gaze on the targets below, and prepares to release the arrow. Gaius launches a magical technique with his bow called rapid fire, and a rain of arrows falls on the goblins. Piercing through them, Miria follows him immediately with her own special move, Diamond Dust, which spins in the air and freezes everything in its path. Larissa stands there, contemplating it all, observing perfectly how the two of them work together. With the pack completely annihilated, the area is silent, leaving a huge pile of monsters in the middle of the path. Miria takes a look at the cleared area and comments that they have probably wiped out every last goblin in the cave. And Gallus observes her for a second before telling her that lately she has become very strong. He points out that her fighting style is totally different now, compared to when she was just a mage. Miria gets shy and tries to downplay it, saying it's actually not that big of a deal. But she can't hide her pride, as she mentions how hard she has been training. And inside, she thinks about all those hours she spent hitting the training mannequin just to be worthy of him. What really proves it to her is fighting by his side. She starts to notice everything he does, his broad vision, his split-second judgment, and his dexterity in his throws. To anyone else they might seem like basic moves, but she knows that they are actually top tier. And she smiles to herself, realizing that there is no one as reliable, not even among the A-rank professionals she has seen. The cave ceiling is all cracked and rocky above them, and below, a pot of hot stew bubbles over the campfire. Gallus and Miria take a break from the hunt to set up camp, with Sucre watching over them, while Miria looks at the fire and asks herself out loud how much time has passed since they started this, and thinks about how wonderful it is that they are finally working for themselves and for each other. Gallus picks up on her mood and smiles, saying that these kinds of quiet moments are really nice. He mentions that lately they have visited many different hunting places. Then he tells her that, once they return to the city tomorrow and have everything ready, Miria gets excited and asks if that means they are finally going to enter the dungeon for real. Gaius just looks at her with a confident smile, appearing totally prepared for whatever comes next. Gaius looks at his camping gear and says he knows that together they will be fine. And Miria realizes that he can finally say that with total confidence. Now she looks at him with a really tender and happy look in her eyes, while Gaius nods with her. And she looks at him feeling completely supported. Miria explains that every time she is out there fighting by his side, all her fear disappears completely, leaving her with a sense of bravery. Gaius scratches his head and asks her if that's really a good thing, but she tells him that it certainly is. She feels that her opinion matters more to him than that of any other group, because his advice keeps her focused and makes her feel like she can dodge anything. While the stew bubbles, she tells him that being part of a team makes her feel really good. Gaius stands there, visibly moved, with a soft smile drawn on his face while he repeats her words with a little laugh, asking if being together really feels this good, and it slips out that in all his time of adventuring, no one had ever told him something like that. Miria just laughs, and tells him that feeling so safe is just a special advantage of being an attacker. The two get comfortable to spend the night sitting by the warm glow of the campfire inside the cave while they share a quiet moment simply looking at each other, feeling totally at ease. Suddenly the silence is broken when she announces that the stew is finally ready, so she looks into the steaming pot full of meat and vegetables, and Gaius takes the first bite, completely surprised by how amazing it tastes. He can't believe it, and thinks to himself that the flavor is much more intense than anything he has cooked himself. Back by the campfire, Miria explains her secret ingredient. She says add butter. That's why the flavor is much better than what he is used to. The next morning arrives, and the sun shines high over the buildings. It seems like a perfect day to train. In the training area, a forest wolf lies slumped on the ground, totally defeated. After the rookies finally finished it off, the group of young adventurers cheers at the top of their lungs, looking very proud of themselves for having won. At that moment, it is announced that the magical beast extermination drill has officially ended, and the lead rookie warrior is euphoric. He tells his team that they can finally start taking on real dungeons. Now the guild clerk watches them from the counter and nods politely, congratulating the kids for passing, but then a rumble echoes through the streets. The kids freeze as if they had just seen a ghost, and it turns out to be a giant monster locked in a huge cage that a team of draconians is dragging through the city. Sucre watches the beast go by, while everyone around him starts to panic. They wonder what that roar was and can't believe how huge the thing is. The huge beast growls while it is being paraded through the streets. Someone mentions that this monster is actually used for training, but the rookies can't believe what they are hearing. The warrior shouts in total disbelief, while the guy next to him wonders who could beat something like that. The guild employee just smiles and tells them that there is an adventurer performing a special training rite at this very moment. And out there on the field, the beast is absolute chaos. It lunges forward with a huge swipe aimed directly at Ben. Larissa stays focused and shouts that the defense buffs are ready. Ben feels the power and says he can take this hit without a problem. So Hannah sees the opportunity and yells at Gul'jin to seize the moment. Everything is perfectly aligned for the leader to step up. Gul'jin puts on a determined look and tells the rest of the group to leave everything to him. He jumps into the air and throws his sword back. He is putting everything he has into his special skill to end the fight. He brings the sword down with a blinding flash, cutting through the air and landing a powerful blow. The beast's head snaps back from the force of the blow. It seems like the S-rank group is finally showing what they are capable of. The sky is clear over the training area. At the end of the training session, the beast is already dead on the ground while the group catches their breath. Varian looks at them with a smile and tells them that's enough for today, and tells them that they have finally mastered the fundamentals of being adventurers, including everything from teamwork to cleaning. He continues by saying that, with their current skills, he wouldn't worry about sending them on a real mission. Ben shouts excitedly, while Hannah says that they are finally ready to face a dungeon together. Varian watches them and thinks to himself that this is nothing more than the starting point. But he tells the group out loud that they have all truly changed since they started this. Hannah smiles at her leader and says she knew Gul'jin could do it if he really tried. And Gul'jin is calm, saying that it was her encouragement that really gave him the strength to finish the job. Larissa looks at Ben with a big smile and tells him that his back seems even broader than usual today. Ben takes it as a joke, saying that a tank isn't worth much without anything to protect. Varian watches the friendly flirting and teamwork of the group with a warm look on his face. He lets out a sigh of satisfaction upon realizing how far they have come since the beginning. Interrupting the moment, Varian yells at them to hurry up and go submit their application to the guild. The scene changes to the center of the city, where the huge guild building stands under the bright morning sky. The 4 members of Crescent Claw are together, looking focused and ready to get back to work. But as they pass by, people start to whisper, asking if it's really them, and saying they thought the group had disappeared. Someone in the crowd mentions that they've heard they've been seen training on the practice fields lately and hunting, although another guy isn't convinced and says that, no matter how hard they try, they can't just erase their past blunders like that. Varian just smiles at all that murmuring, commenting on how much young people love gossip. As they walk toward the guild counter, they approach the counter, catching the clerk totally off guard for a second. But he quickly realizes who is in front of him and greets the members of Crescent Claw. And Master Varian with a smile. He tells them they've done a great job with their training and asks what else he can help them with today. Varian gets straight to the point and tells the clerk that he's going to send the group to clear that specific dungeon. The clerk adjusts his glasses and says he knows exactly which one Varian is referring to. While Hannah and Larissa look a little confused, Hannah asks him to clarify which dungeon he is actually talking about. The clerk explains that it is a B-rank place, but things are strange there, because they have seen special monsters that don't match the local species. He continues by saying that no one has been able to complete it yet, and that it is becoming a serious problem because it has been abandoned for a long time. Gul'jin looks quite uneasy and says it sounds like a creepy story, while Varian stands there laughing. Varian continues talking and explains that this whole matter is a real headache for the guild, since the rewards aren't good enough for high rankers, and yet the job itself is too much for anyone rank B or lower. So they are thinking about increasing the difficulty level. Gul'jin listens to the explanation and starts putting the pieces together. He realizes that this specific dungeon is basically the perfect opportunity to prove their worth and get back into action. Ben seems very enthusiastic about the plan. He looks ahead and tells the group it's time to get going. The group heads out together, completely ignoring all the drama and gossip that the townspeople have been spreading about them. They are focused on one thing, completing this dungeon raid and clearing their name once and for all. Gul'jin is in the lead with a lot of confidence, ready to face anything strange and undead that might be waiting for them inside. The group stops before the huge stone doors of the dungeon entrance. Riding their mounts, Gul'jin looks toward the entrance and Ben laughs in the rear. Both are ready to finally start this raid. Gul'jin keeps his eyes on the goal, while Ben shouts that it's been a while since they did a real raid. Varian tells the group to focus and prepare themselves, but Larissa admits she is actually starting to get a little nervous, which is the complete opposite of Hannah, who is super excited because she will finally be able to give it her all and cast all the magic she wants. The whole group stays together as the heavy doors begin to move. The raid is finally taking place. Whenever someone shows up with enough courage to challenge this place, the huge stone doors respond by opening wide for them. This is the dungeon, a place where the normal rules of the world no longer apply. Glowing eyes watch from the darkness, while monsters wait to pounce from every corner. But even if they defeat them, the dungeon ends up absorbing their remains back into the walls. Here day and night don't exist either. The whole place remains lit 24/7. Dungeons are not simple. They don't have a single fixed entrance, but rather they tend to appear randomly wherever they feel like. Getting out of them is just as complicated, because there are actually only a couple of ways to get out of a dungeon alive. The first way out is to find a specific magic circle hidden somewhere inside that connects to the outside world. The second option is to locate the dungeon boss, kill it, and then destroy the glowing core hidden inside it. If a group manages to get the core, the dungeon is considered completed, and everyone is transported to the outside instantly. Gul'jin and Hannah guide the group into the depths of the tunnels on their mounts. As they travel, someone brings up the rumors they've heard about a special variant monster that might be lurking nearby, which makes Hannah intervene, asking why exactly the details about this creature are so vague and difficult to understand. She barely finishes the sentence when she stops. Something is definitely changing in the air around them. Larissa puts her scouting skills into practice, looking completely stressed, and says she is picking up a strong vibration that smells like failure. A huge scaly foot with sharp claws hits the stone floor hard. 3 reptilian monsters called psychic noses crawl out of the darkness. And they approach. Gul'jin yells that it's a magical beast, while Hannah watches, starting to have a bad feeling. She covers her mouth and says the smell is not good at all, realizing that there is definitely something weird about these things. Varian starts to sweat and asks if this thing is actually an undead, since there was nothing about it in any of the reports. Warns the group that their usual way of fighting is not going to be enough against an enemy like this. But Gul'jin just gives a confident look and says, it doesn't matter if it's a half-breed, or whatever. He unsheathes his sword and says that an undead adversary is the perfect opportunity to show everyone what he is capable of. Varian just watches him with a look of surprise, waiting to see how the guy is going to handle the situation, especially because Gul'jin is a paladin, basically a high-level knight who received a special blessing after all those years of intense training. Gul'jin's blows naturally have a sacred attribute, so he doesn't even need to use any additional enchantments. And since that sacred power is the great weakness of undead monsters, he is basically the perfect antidote. A normal group would be struggling in a situation like this, but this is the moment when Gul'jin, the holy knight and combat leader of the Crescent Claw group, starts showing off an incredible power that goes far beyond what anyone could do. He yells at everyone to keep up the pressure, calling for a very fast attack. The rest of the group follows his lead. Ben raises his weapon and prepares to launch into the attack. Gul'jin lets out a shout while wielding his sword in a wide, huge circle, slicing through the monster as he passes by it while riding his steed, and stops right in front, looking back at his group while the dust of the fight begins to settle. The group is overcoming the challenge with ease, as if it were nothing, and Varian watches with a big smile, thinking that the whole thing is actually quite impressive. It turns out that all that training has really paid off, given that the Crescent Claw group has its coordination perfectly synchronized. Even an expert like Varian stares in awe, as they simply wipe out all the monsters in their path. And that's how it's been since they started venturing into the dungeon. Now 3 full days have passed since they started. The team is finally taking a breather at a small camp they've set up in the ruins. Ben mentions that they have already cleared 5 floors, so since it's only a B-rank place, they should have it almost finished. But then Hannah takes a look around the camp and asks where Jurgen is hiding. One of them points out that Jurgen just went to get water a second ago. Larissa looks at Hannah, who has a very serious expression on her face. Hannah stares at her drink and says that, since they've made it this far on their own, they finally realize how much Gaius was really doing to take care of them. She looks off into the distance and mentions how much she wishes he could see how they have grown. However, she admits to herself that asking him to come back is just a selfish wish. She thinks that, at the very least, she wants to truly make the Crescent Claw party known. And sincerely, she hopes that somehow, somewhere out there, Gaius ends up finding out. Hannah has a look of pure determination in her eyes as she makes this silent promise. But first and foremost, she knows they have to focus on completing this dungeon safely. Someone yells that dinner is ready, catching Gul'jin totally off guard. And he responds by shouting that he's coming. But the scene suddenly changes to the dark stone entrance of the dungeon. Where things are taking a turn, Gul'jin and the girls look completely stressed out. While Varian stands there laughing as if it were a joke, a flaming horse-like monster charges forward. And someone points out that a really problematic creature has just appeared. Ben loses his nerve and shouts that that thing is, in reality, a nightmare, while Larissa panics, wondering why a monster like that would even be in a B-rank dungeon. The nightmare is a true force of nature that literally devours the mind of anyone who gets too close. And once it attacks you, it's game over. You just die slowly without ever waking up again. Gul'jin and Gaia stand firm, but both know they are in a real mess. Gul'jin and Ben prepare for the fight, but Gul'jin admits that it's not the first time he's faced one of these. It's just that before Gaius was always there to help, and he knows that trying to fight this thing as if it were a normal monster is going to be a real nightmare. He starts to doubt himself, wondering if he can make it without Gaius's support to lean on. But Hannah notices that he's overthinking the matter and asks him what he's doing there. Pondering alone, she looks totally unbothered and asks him if the plan basically consists of blowing the horse's head off, which catches Gul'jin totally off guard. He just stares at her, realizing that she has no fear at all. And then Larissa speaks up. She's a bit shaky, but she says that she has also been thinking of a way to handle this. She suggests they use Hana's ice magic to carve a path through the flames, and promises to maintain a sacred barrier to protect everyone. While Ben gets energized in the background, Ben launches directly into action, shouting that he will step to the front to lead the charge. Ben adjusts his armor and tells the rest of the group that he's counting on them to cover his back if anything goes wrong. And Gul'jin just looks at Ben and Larissa totally stunned. He can't believe how willing they are to rush into battle, which makes him realize that, in reality, he had become quite timid lately without even realizing it. He starts to think that he can't keep chasing Gaius's shadow forever. He knows he has to move forward, especially now that it's clear he's not going to fight this battle alone. He looks at his team and finally feels like he has people again that he can truly rely on. Ben says the plan is officially set, and Larissa yells for everyone to get moving, while Ben focuses and begins the charge with a look of total concentration. Larissa stays right behind him, invoking her special skill to create a series of barriers, and then she uses her support magic to hide their advance so they can take the enemy by surprise. The nightmare monster stands tall, looking huge and dangerous, but Ben stands firm right in front of it. Hannah and Gul'jin look each other in the eye and concentrate, preparing to cast a powerful combined spell together. While the wind begins to swirl around them, Larissa watches from the side, while the two remain perfectly synchronized. Both are totally determined to give it their all, saying they are going to strike these things with all the power they have. Gul'jin starts the chant, invoking sacred light to inhabit his sword, while Hana gathers her mana and asks the icy air to join the attack. They function like a well-oiled machine again, and command the energy to take the shape they desire and carve its way through the chaos. Gul'jin shouts for the magic to be unleashed and annihilate all enemies that stand in their way. Then Hannah unleashes her icicle path spell, creating an icy path that leads directly to the target. Gul'jin finishes it off with a slash of holy anima, catching the nightmare in a huge explosion of light. And steel, the nightmare gets caught right in the middle of the huge explosion, and Hannah yells that this is the final blow to put an end to the fight. Everything rises in a huge explosion, leaving nothing but smoke, while the last remains of the beast fade away into the air. Varian laughs and tells them they did a great job, and Gul'jin says everything went well, while Hannah says it was easy thanks to their teamwork. Varian observes the area as the smoke finally dissipates, and thinks to himself about how easy it was for them to finish off a nightmare. He realizes that the group is, in reality, much more powerful than he thought, and admits that encountering such a strong monster in this dungeon was simply bad luck. Sucre thinks this is not impossible, but that the appearance of a half-undead monster changes things, and he knows for sure that something is going very wrong in this dungeon. Varian looks into the darkness and mentions that they should reach the lower floor soon, but he realizes that some annoying pests have been following them the whole way. He tells himself it's best to stay alert while he guides Sucre past the rest of the group. As the stone stairs lead even deeper into the darkness, Dondi Gul'jin is busy taking down a bunch of flying monsters amidst all the dust. Later, the group sits around a campfire to eat and drink something, and replenish their strength, and in the end, they all end up falling asleep on the floor to get some rest. Gul'jin keeps moving forward on Sucre's back and says that they have finally reached the place. The group finally reaches the ground floor and stares at the huge stone door in front of them. And Larissa mentions that she is starting to get a little nervous about what awaits them inside. Ben agrees and says he never gets used to that strange tension just before a boss battle. They continue going down the stairs together, staying close as they reach the last level, until Gul'jin suddenly stops and tells everyone to wait because something doesn't add up. Hana narrows her eyes and says that, actually, she can feel someone else nearby. So the whole group goes silent, looking around the dark hallway for any sign of movement. Gul'jin decides to take the lid off and tells Hana to stay back and cover his back. And she quickly lets him know she's ready to go. Gul'jin draws his sword and stuck to the stone wall, peeking carefully around the corner. Gul'jin lunges forward with his sword drawn, moving at great speed. But his blade is instantly blocked by a dark-haired guy wielding a dagger. Both freeze as their eyes meet. Neither can believe who is in front of them, but the rest of the group stops right behind Gul'jin. Totally taken by surprise, Gul'jin shouts Gaius's name in total disbelief, while Gaius stands firm. And then a heavy silence takes over the hallway as both sides stare at each other. Gul'jin starts to sweat, thinking to himself how incredibly awkward this whole situation has become. He starts overthinking it, wondering why Gallus is here while Varian stands in the back laughing. And that's when Gul'jin realizes that it was his master who organized this whole meeting. He assumes the old man must have tracked both of their locations through guild records for this to happen. Gul'jin is sweating buckets, realizing that Varian planned this whole awkward meeting from the start. Varian isn't making things easy for him, yelling at him to stop standing there, and to say something for once. Gul'jin starts to panic frantically, wondering what he is supposed to do, or say in a situation like this. Larissa also intervenes, telling her leader that he has to pull himself together and behave properly, while Hana adds that he has to make a good impression, since the confrontation has already begun. He takes a second to clear his throat, doing his best to shake off his nerves, and appear calm, but his greeting to Gaius is incredibly stiff, as he struggles to find some way to explain himself. Then suddenly, he changes his attitude and acts like a cheerful TV host, asking Gaius what he's doing in the dungeon. Gaius stands there with a blank look, totally baffled by how weirdly his former leader is acting. The rest of the group can only watch from behind, looking completely exhausted by the embarrassing scene. Gul'jin starts to lose his cool, shouting that he has completely messed up his big moment. Gaius stands there, looking completely exhausted by the guy's energy. Miria steps forward and asks Gaius what's going on, seeing the strange atmosphere in the group. But as soon as she speaks, the whole former group freezes with their eyes wide open. Gaius explains it simply and tells the group her name is Miria, and mentions that he only met her after they all parted ways. Gul'jin and Hana lose it, shouting that Gaius is actually traveling with a girl, while someone in the background whispers trying to figure out who she is. Hana asks if they really came all this way with just 2 people, thinking it's a bit of an exaggeration, but Larissa stands there blushing, saying that Miria is super cute. Larissa keeps saying out loud how cute Miria is, which is awkward because Gaius and Miria can hear every word they say. Gaius gets the conversation back on track by explaining that his goal is to get a magic sword here, and that he plans to keep supporting Miria even after the job is done. Gul'jin is completely surprised to hear this, acting as if it were a huge revelation. But then he softens and says he's just glad Gaius isn't out there alone. Gaius just laughs and tells him he was thinking exactly the same thing, and adds that it's a pleasure to see the whole old gang doing well. He smiles and admits that, actually, he was quite worried about how they would manage. But that really strikes a chord with Hana, who asks him if he really just said he was worried. Hana gets mad at him, yelling that the whole situation after he left was a total nightmare, and adds that if he was going to leave all his stuff with them, he should have at least left a note. He finally admits it was mostly his fault for skipping the official handover, while Gul'jin stands there, realizing the situation has become quite awkward. He can't stop thinking about how they just had such an emotional farewell, only to meet him again the very next moment. And the pressure is getting to him so much that he doesn't even know what to say. Hana realizes he's acting strangely and moving around non-stop, so she calls him out and asks why he's so quiet. Suddenly, he tries to explain to her that, when it comes to Gaius, he's completely speechless. Hana just looks at him and asks him how he really feels seeing his old friend again. Gul'jin lowers his gaze with a grave expression, clearly with a lot on his mind. And finally, he starts to speak, telling Gaius that he really wants him to see his combat. But that's not all. He adds that he wants Gaius to fight alongside them once again, and bows his head deeply, saying he just wants the chance to apologize properly for everything. Hannah watches from the side with a small smile, while Gul'jin struggles to find the right words. So she nudges him and tells him to go ahead, say whatever he has to say. Gul'jin calls to him, which makes Gaius turn around and ask him what's worrying him. The leader of the group takes a second to pull himself together, with a more determined air than before, and asks if they can try it one more time, officially inviting Gaius to join the group again. Gaius stands there, completely surprised by the offer. Gaius stands there, completely baffled, and only manages to make a sound of surprise as he tries to process what he just heard. Gul'jin keeps talking, explaining that their goal is simple and they just want to complete this dungeon with him, and even offers Gaius everything they find. The loot and the magic sword they have collected are all his. He tells Gaius he wants him to judge how strong they have become, and to lend them a hand in the fight, which leaves Gaius totally speechless. Miria watches from the side while Gaius starts to sweat, unable to articulate a word because the offer is so unexpected. She looks at him and wonders what he's going to do, while Gaius remembers everything that happened with this group. It feels strange for him to even think about fighting alongside the same people who kicked him out in the first place. But he knows that if Gul'jin hadn't been so sincere about it, he probably would have turned it down on the spot. But the real reason why Gaius is finding it so hard to say no right now is because he can see how serious Gul'jin is just by looking into his eyes, and it's clear the guy really believes in what he's saying. Varian looks at Gaius and acknowledges that this whole situation probably feels like it came out of nowhere. So he gets straight to the point and asks Gaius if he's interested in seeing what his former teammates are capable of. Now Gaius stands there, looking bewildered, repeating the words. True power, as if he couldn't believe what he's hearing. Varian just laughs and mentions that even a veteran like him had to put in a lot of effort to get them into shape. Besides, he's quite direct about it. He tells Gaius that the group used to be, quite honestly, pathetic in many respects, which leaves Hannah and Larissa totally embarrassed, as he explains that most people like them never bother to change. But the members of Crescent Claw didn't let the comments around them get to their heads. In fact, they listened to his advice and worked their butts off. Varian points out that they have cleared this whole dungeon conquest completely on their own, without any help from him or from Gaius, and it's clear they have reached this level solely thanks to their own effort. They are no longer riding on anyone else's success, as the whole group stands together, looking prepared for anything. Varian tells Gaius that this isn't the same team. He remembers. Gaius takes a second to process it all. Varian has just told him about the group's growth, and finally he says he understands. So he suggests they all join up right now to finish clearing the rest of the dungeon together. Even the Draconix mounts are happy to see each other again. One of them says it's been too long, while the other asks how things have been going lately. Hannah smiles as she realizes that it's really been a long time since the last time they fought side by side with Gaius like this, and points out that the fact that he and Miria have made it this far alone proves that they are top-tier adventurers, which encourages everyone and says he's counting on them. Gaius just laughs and tells them to stop doing that, acting with humility, and saying he's not in a position to look down on anyone, because the truth is that he himself had quite a hard time facing some of the monsters during the descent. Monsters, like the Zagnos and those burning, half-undead nightmares that Hannah says are too powerful to even be inside a normal B-rank dungeon. She asks him if Gaius also ran into those things, and when he says yes, he finally opens up a little, and admits sincerely that he was starting to worry that just him and Miria wouldn't be enough to defeat the final boss on their own. Gaius starts analyzing the situation, saying that if they really reevaluate the rank of this place, there is no doubt that the boss waiting behind those big doors is S-rank. The rest of the group stops what they are doing to listen to him, and when everything calms down, Larissa directs her attention to Miria and asks if she's the one who has been traveling with Gaius. Hannah stands to the side with her arms crossed, looking at the new girl with quite a bit of skepticism, while Miria just smiles and introduces herself, explaining that she is Gaius's companion and official member of the party. She tells them her name is Miria and tells them she is a magic swordswoman, but Hannah just lets out a snort of boredom. Acting as if the news didn't exactly impress her, she tells Miria to just do her best, and makes sure to add that she better not end up weighing the rest of them down. Miria doesn't respond, but her face remains totally expressionless, as the comment clearly hit a nerve. Miria doesn't stand idly by at the insult and says that, unlike a certain S-rank group, she actually trains every day so there's no reason to worry. She even adds that she's worried that the big sister instincts of her older companions have rusted since their last dungeon raid. Hannah lets out a fake laugh and tells Miria she has a big mouth for a mere all-rounder. But then she threatens her, telling Miria to be careful that her fire magic doesn't turn that long hair into a frizzy perm. Miria just smiles and asks if that means Hannah doesn't trust her own magic control, which really strikes a chord. She tells Hannah to stay back and sit on her hands while the real work gets done. Hannah loses her cool and tells Miria not to underestimate a black mage's firepower. She makes sure to remind the girl that she is the main damage dealer of the Crescent Claw group, and that Miria should just stick to running around and taking out the filler monsters in the back. The two end up in a tense standoff, growling at each other as sparks fly between them. Larissa gets excited and tells the guys to step aside, as this is a women's battle, and she won't let anyone interfere, while Ben stands there, looking completely exhausted by the whole situation. Gul'jin finally intervenes to get everyone back in order, reminding the group that they're actually supposed to have a strategy meeting before going in. The whole team gathers in front of the huge door. They appear as a real team again, standing there with their mounts, waiting for the order to leave. Larissa looks around and comments that the place has a pretty nice atmosphere and calm, and that's when Ben starts thinking about how much things have changed, realizing that this is not the same version of Crescent Claw that he knew. And he realizes that it's not just the others. He himself has changed a lot since they started together. Gallus looks at his former group members and tells them he is ready to show them exactly how much he has matured since they kicked him out. Gul'jin puts on a serious look and says that the plan is finally ready, asking the group if they are really prepared for this. Gallus just gives him a mocking smile and tells him it's a bit late to ask if they're prepared. Now that they are standing before the door, the two stand side by side, facing the entrance. And Gallus lets him go ahead. He will cover his back no matter what happens inside. It turns out someone has manipulated the monsters in this dungeon, gifting them all with undead powers they didn't have before. And this dark energy was so strong that it turned everything, from skeletons to nightmares, into half-undead monsters, so it seems. The team expects to encounter some kind of high-level undead boss at the end. So an S-rank monster is waiting in the dark for Crescent Claw to finally walk through those doors. The group gathers in front of the huge stone entrance, taking a second to see what they are up against. And Gallus mentions that the pressure coming from the other side of the wall is truly crazy. Gul'jin tells everyone not to chicken out now, and reminds them to stick to the plan they made. But the monsters start pouncing on them before they can even move. So Gul'jin yells at Ben to get to the front and take care of them. Ben focuses and gets ready to use his heavy shield knight skill to hold the group's line, and lets out a huge shout, using his skill provoke to ensure that each and every monster focuses on him instead of his friends. Ben rushes straight into the center of the chaos, raising his shield high to block the first wave of monsters. Larissa doesn't waste time either. She activates a special High Priestess skill to create a huge barrier around the group. The plan is for Ben to stay out of the main offensive so he can distract the small-time monsters and focus solely on taking the hits. Meanwhile, Larissa takes care of all the work behind the scenes. She is busy applying debuffs to the monsters while maintaining everyone's health and giving them buffs. The fight begins with everyone perfectly synchronized. But then it becomes clear that the group members aren't the only ones doing the heavy lifting here. The Draconix mounts charge down the stone hallway screaming and ready to tear something apart. These magical beasts are true power machines and begin tearing the enemies apart with their teeth and claws, letting their wild instincts take control. While the mounts and Ben keep the crowd busy, the rest of the team finds an opening and runs straight toward the target. Jurgen and his team advance without hesitation for a second, fully trusting that they have backup, while Gaius keeps pace, commenting on how much the rest of the group has grown fond of Jurgen. Jurgen seems focused and replies that they are no longer the same people who used to dump all their problems on Gallus. Gallus gives a small smile, seeing how much his old friend has changed. Jurgen fixes his gaze on the skeletal monster in front of them and says they must focus on taking down the big threat right in front of them. He gets energized and shouts in agreement as he prepares to give it his all, and then Jurgen strikes with all his might, delivering a strong physical blow directly to the monster. It turns out a lick can condense its magic until it solidifies, coating itself in that energy like a heavy cloak. That thick layer of magic acts as a shield, and since it's made of pure mana, it's strong enough to shrug off Jurgen's holy attacks like they were nothing. Even with Jurgen's strong blow, it seems the initial attack had no effect. But just then the lick stops moving suddenly. The rest of the group sees their chance. Synchronizing everything perfectly while Hannah concentrates all her strength, her spell is almost ready, and she looks completely focused while holding her staff high. The final chant begins. Proclaiming she takes command by her own authority, she orders the flames and lightning to get moving, asking for a gigantic storm to fall and burn all the evil in front of her. Hannah shouts the name of her ultimate move, Insaner, and a rain of lightning, and an incredible amount of energy begin to fall upon the lick. The monster is completely shattered by the lightning, which strikes it from all directions, and the whole area lights up in a huge explosion of magic and sound that seems like it should have finished it off. When the smoke starts to dissipate, Hannah stands firm and watches to see if it worked, only to see that the monster is still there. It turns out the monster managed to raise a magic barrier just when the spell hit it, protecting itself from that roaring and devastating attack. Hannah's high-level thunder magic ends up failing to take the monster down, but Miria just smiles, saying she has been waiting for this exact moment to take action. She moves like lightning, drawing her sword while closing the distance, putting all her strength into a huge, and at great speed, while her blade strikes and sends a huge blast of light through the lick. She lands a perfect critical hit, taking advantage of the opening from the previous attacks. So the monster takes real damage for the first time all day. The monster seems to have stopped playing around completely. It looks furious and suddenly launches an insane wave of dark energy in the shape of a skull. And the whole group gets caught in the explosion, being thrown back by the force. Gaius looks around through the smoke and dust, asking if everyone is okay. After that huge explosion, Gul'jin grips his sword tightly and yells that he can barely hold out against the lick. While Hannah prepares her next spell, she yells that she is going to attack again right that instant, and that she needs her mana recharged immediately. Gaius doesn't hesitate for a second and tells her to leave it to him. As he takes out a potion, he takes a run-up and throws a high-quality mana potion across the battlefield using his throwing skill. And the bottle breaks perfectly, splashing both Hannah and Gul'jin with a huge burst of mana energy. Hannah thanks him for the help. Meanwhile, Gul'jin admits that Gaius is, in reality, a guy you can rely on. So Gaius stands there with a calm smile on his face, enjoying the moment. He starts to feel a strange and intense sensation in his chest that he can't even describe, and he realizes that it's the first time the Crescent Claw group has thanked him during a fight. Gul'jin thanks him, and Gallus stands there feeling it. It's the first time he hears those words from them. The lick keeps floating there, in the middle of all that smoke and energy. While the monster lets out a loud roar, Gallus watches closely and thinks to himself that everything is going quite well. You know what? Once they accumulate enough damage, the lick will move on to its next phase, so it will probably try to fly and hit them with some area of effect spell to clear the area. But Gallus keeps his gaze fixed on the target, noting that everything is going exactly according to his plan. And the monster heads directly toward the weak point that Miria managed to open before. He pulls his weapon back and shouts that he is going to fire a magic arrow right now. He combines the arrow with a bit of holy water, and everything explodes against the lick's chest. Gallus says this is going to strip the monster of the rest of its magic mantle forever. Gul'jin yells that this is the opportunity Gallus has given them, and tells the team to keep the pressure on. And Larissa agrees. Gul'jin and Miria advance together, delivering a huge combined blow right into the lick's body. And then Hannah swings her staff from the side to inflict even more magic damage while the monster staggers. But Ben and Larissa stay behind, on guard next to the horses, watching as the group fights the monster. Gaius watches the fight with his bow ready, thinking to himself that this thing is too persistent. He knows that if he doesn't end this now, the fight will gradually wear him down until he has nothing left. He starts thinking about what he has to do to finish off the lick once and for all. He leans back and takes a scroll out of his bag, telling himself he has no choice but to push himself to the limit. So Gaius concentrates with a look of pure determination, preparing for one last big move to end it all. And he takes out a holy attribute scroll, using it to imbue his next blow with a large amount of holy energy. Gallus starts clenching his teeth while the pure magic energy crackles around him, and lets out a grunt of pain from the effort. He draws his bow and fires a huge holy arrow, which pierces directly into the lick with a blinding flash. Gaius yells that he is using his own body to refine all this magical power. Yelling as the energy reaches a breaking point, Miria sees the opportunity and quickly makes her way through the chaos, staying low while the light floods the area. And Hannah stands there, completely stunned, watching as Gaius achieves something she didn't think was possible. Gaius fixes his gaze on the target and yells that he is going to end this right now, staring at the monster while remaining totally focused on the shot. With his face reflecting the enormous effort it takes to keep the power stable. He is using the enchantment of that holy attribute scroll to increase his strength. But it's clear it's taking a huge toll on him. It's a really reckless move, because he is basically sacrificing his own health just to release so much energy. So at this moment, it's basically a double-edged sword, and it's impossible for his body to hold out for long. Miria looks completely panicked and yells Gaius's name when the energy around him reaches its peak. The holy arrow finally breaks free from the bowstring in a huge, blinding explosion of light that floods the room. Gaius lets out a huge shout while fighting against the recoil of the shot, putting everything he has into the attack. The beam of light travels instantly and crashes right in the middle of the lick, and the monster's body begins to disintegrate and break into 1,000 pieces under the pressure of the holy magic. Gaius stands there, breathing hard and looking totally exhausted as the smoke from the explosion starts to dissipate, while Miria watches with wide eyes and asks if they finally managed to kill it. But the licked skull appears again from the darkness, as if it barely had a scratch. The thing lets out a maddening screech that shakes the whole area, and it turns out it still has plenty of strength left. As it launches itself into the air again to go on the offensive, the story introduces us to Gallus, an item master who was kicked out of an S-rank group for being considered weak and useless, but very soon it becomes clear that without him, the team literally falls apart. They don't know how to sell loot, take care of equipment, or even survive basic situations. Meanwhile, Gallus himself begins a new path, little by little finding his place, and people who truly value him. In the end, the story takes a new turn. His old team asks him to return, even if just for a single battle. And that's where it becomes evident he was never weak. On the contrary, he was the one who held everything together. But now the team itself has also changed. After facing their mistakes, this is interesting because it breaks the typical cliché of him being kicked out and becoming too powerful to get revenge. Here there is development on both sides, both of the protagonist and his old group. You feel real growth, responsibility, and even some regret. But not everyone might like it. Some might find the story slow, as a large part of it isn't just about combat, but also about logistics, routine, and interaction within the team. Also, there is no immediate punishment for those who kicked out the protagonist. Everything happens gradually. Still, the atmosphere is very lively, from comedic moments where the team fails without Gallus, to intense battles where everyone finally fulfills their role. And one of the strongest moments is when, for the first time, they thank Gallus in combat. Something simple, but which had never happened for him before. And now the question for you. Do you think Gallus should return to that team after everything that happened? Write your opinion in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Subscribe to the channel.